Ethan opened his eyes and saw a gray stone ceiling. His head felt as if someone had driven a rusty nail into his temple. He was lying on the cold floor in the middle of a huge hall. All around him stood people in leather armor with weapons at their belts. 20 pairs of eyes looked down at him. No one reached out to help him. Standing before him was a man in a black cloak with a silver clasp in the shape of a blade, broad shoulders, a square jaw, eyes like those of a man accustomed to giving orders and who had never heard the word no. Guildmaster Darius Hale. For some reason, Ethan knew that name. He knew that face. He knew this hall. Other people's memories lodged in his head like splinters. 3 years of filthy work, sewers, slime, stench, the nickname Slimeball. And now this man was holding the guild insignia in his hand, a small engraved silver token. Darius said that Ethan Moore was officially expelled from the Silver Blade Guild for uselessness and cowardice. His voice was even bored, as if he were tossing away a broken chair. Then he flung the token. The metal struck the stone floor and into 2 pieces. The sound echoed through the hall like a slap in the face. Someone laughed, then another. Then the whole hall burst into laughter. Ethan looked up and saw a girl in the 3rd row. Her light hair was pulled back into a ponytail. Her slender fingers gripped the hilt of a short sword. She looked away. He had saved her 3 times on missions. 3 times he'd shielded her with his own body. And now she was staring at the wall because the squad captain was standing next to her. Tall, handsome, useful. 2 hunters grabbed Ethan by the arms and dragged him toward the exit. His feet scraped against the stone. The heavy doors swung open and he was thrown out onto the street. Rain, mud up to his ankles. He fell face first into a puddle and tasted blood from his split lip. The doors slammed shut behind him. The laughter died down. All that remained was the sound of the rain and the pounding of his own heart. Ethan rolled onto his back. Raindrops pelted his face, cold, heavy, and at that moment, a sound rang out in his head, clear, high-pitched, like a crystal blast being struck. A translucent panel with text appeared before his eyes. Monster Farmer System activated. Recommended location, Deadroot Swamp. Starting capital, 3 silver coins. Starting pet, slime. Rank F, the weakest species. Good luck. Ethan lay in the mud, staring at those lines. The rain washed away the blood on his chin. 3 silver coins. An F-rank slime. The swamp. He laughed, quietly at first, then louder. His laughter mingled with blood and rainwater. Passers-by gave him a wide berth. A madman in a puddle. But Ethan wasn't laughing out of despair. The memories in his head belonged to a failure. But what lay behind them, what had come along with this panel, was something else entirely. He didn't remember where, but he knew things. He knew what crossbreeding was. He knew what a feed base was. He knew that genetics was an equation with many variables. This knowledge didn't belong to the guy who'd just been kicked out of the guild. It belonged to someone else. To someone who had spent his entire life working with living creatures. And that someone was now looking at the line slime, rank F, the weakest species, and didn't see a death sentence. He saw raw material. Ethan sat down. He wiped the blood off with the back of his hand. 3 silver coins were indeed lying in his pocket. He didn't know where they'd come from. A minute ago, they weren't there. He stood up. His legs were shaking, but they held him up. Deadroot Swamp. He'd heard that name in other people's memories. A desolate place on the southern outskirts. 20 acres of marsh and putrid water. Land that no one bought because there was nothing to do there. Not even beggars went there. Ethan walked down the street. The rain didn't let up. People looked right through him. A former hunter without an empty place. He walked past shops and taverns, past stables where battle wolves, shadow walkers the size of a horse, stood. Past the square where an aristocrat in a white cloak sat astride a griffin and looked down on the crowd as if they were ants. The world of Argillian was simple. Power was determined by monsters. The more powerful your pet, the higher your standing. Griffins, teenage dragons, chimeras, these were the pinnacles. And at the very bottom, lower than rats and beetles, sat the slugs. Walking bags of acid, good only for fertilizing fields. Breeding slugs in this world was like breeding earthworms. Technically possible, but no one would sit at the same table with you. Ethan left the city through the south gate. The guard didn't even glance his way. The road turned into a trail. The trail turned into mud. The mud turned into a swamp. After 2 hours of walking, he saw a cribbed shack with a caved-in roof, a fence made of rotten stakes, 20 acres of brown water and black clumps. The stench of rotten water was so thick you could almost chew it. Ethan stopped at the fence. Something gurgled under his feet. He looked down. A lump the size of a fist, translucent, greenish, 2 murky dots on what could be called a face. A slime. F rank. The weakest species in this world. A creature any hunter would have crushed with a boot without even looking. It was bubbling and hiccuping. Ethan crouched down. Rain ran down his face. He looked at the slime, and the slime looked back at him. And at that moment, a tree appeared above the creature, translucent, glowing with a soft green light. A trunk and branches. Dozens of branches. Each branch extended to the side and ended with an icon. Ethan counted. 47. 47 hidden lines of evolution. For all the other farmers, there was only one line. A slug. Then a big slug. Then a dead slug. For Ethan, everything was revealed. The system highlighted every branch. A line of fire. A line of ice. A line of poison. A line of stone. A line of light. A line of darkness. A symbiotic line. The intelligent line. And 39 more paths he couldn't read yet. Locked. Requires care points. Ethan looked at this tree and, for the first time all day, felt his hands stop trembling. He knew what that meant. This wasn't junk. It was raw material with 47 possible outcomes. All he needed was the right ration. The system issued a new notification. Unlocked. Tree of Evolution. Open branches. 12. Second notification. Ration analysis activated. Ethan turned his head. The grass on a nearby mound glowed with a soft light. Parameters appeared above each stalk. Marsh bindweed. Water element +1. Mutagenic potential 2 out of 10. Suitable as a base food. A stone nearby. Iron ore. Earth element +2. Fortification property. Ethan saw the world as a formula. Every blade of grass, every stone, every drop of water, everything had parameters. Everything could be combined. He reached out and picked up the slug. It was warm and it pulsed in his palm like a tiny heart. It didn't twitch. It didn't try to escape. It just sat there, staring with 2 cloudy dots. Ethan told it that they'd start small, that he had a plan, that in 60 days, no one in this world would dare call a slug trash. The slug hiccuped. The bubble burst in his palm. Ethan smirked. Then he stood up. He walked into the hut. The roof was leaking in 3 places. The floor was dirt. A broken bed stood in the corner. A dead rat lay on the table. He placed the slug on the table. He opened the system menu. 3 silver coins. The cost of 1 sack of basic rations. 1.5 silver coins. The cost of repairing the roof. 2 silver coins. The cost of a fence. 1 silver coin. He didn't have enough for everything. Ethan closed the menu. He looked at the slug. He looked at the leaky roof. He looked at his hands. Then he stepped out into the rain. He found some long stalks of marsh sedge. He cut them with the knife that was still in his boot. He spent 3 hours weaving patches. The roof stopped leaking in 2 out of 3 places. He covered the 3rd hole with his jacket. Then he gathered some stones. He built a makeshift pen, 2 by 2 meters. Then he picked some marsh snail and crumbled it into a wooden bowl. The slug ate greedily. It puffed up with pleasure. A notification appeared above it. Care points, +1. The creature's gratitude, base level. Ethan sat down on the floor next to the pen. Rain pattered against the wall. The swamp gurgled and sloshed in the darkness. Somewhere far to the north, 3,200 Stonefang orcs were sharpening their axes. But Ethan didn't know that yet. He knew only one thing. Tomorrow morning he would go in search of fireweed. He had seen it on the system map, red dots on the southern shore of the swamp, near the ruins of an old chapel. A blue dot also glowed on the map in that same spot. Water with the consecration property. 2 ingredients. 2 different paths of evolution. The system's pulse flickered at the edge of his vision. Quietly. Patiently. As if it had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Morning came without the sun. The gray sky lay over the swamp like a wet blanket. Ethan woke up on the floor, because the broken bed hadn't been able to support his weight during the night and had finally collapsed. His back ached. He couldn't turn his neck. The slug sat in its pen and stared at him with 2 cloudy dots. Ethan stood up. He stretched his shoulders. He opened the system map. Red dots of fiery grass glowed 1.5 kilometers to the south. A blue dot of holy water, a little further on, by the ruins of the chapel. He grabbed his knife, his only weapon. Then he looked at his stats. The system helpfully brought up the panel. Strength, 2 out of 100. Dexterity, 3 out of 100. Stamina, 4 out of 100. Combat potential, 0. System recommendation. Avoid direct combat. Probability of survival in a clash with an E-rank monster, 3%. Ethan closed the panel. He knew even without the system that he couldn't fight. His former host's body had spent 3 years clearing slugs from the sewers. It hadn't fought them. It had run away from them. Ethan put the slug in his jacket pocket. The pocket sagged under the weight. The slug gurgled contentedly. The road to the south bank ran through a swamp. Ethan sank knee-deep 4 times. Once, he nearly lost a boot. The swamp mud squelched and sloshed under his feet. The stench was so bad it made his eyes water. But the system was working. Every blade of grass was highlighted. Marsh moss. Water element +1. Mutagenic potential 1 out of 10. Useless. Rotten root. Darkness element +1. High toxicity. Not for feeding. Blackberry. Chaos element +2. Caution. Unstable ingredient. 17% risk of fatality for the pet. Ethan avoided the dangerous plants and memorized the locations of the useful ones. After an hour of walking, he spotted a red patch amid the gray-green mass of the swamp. Firegrass. Low bushes with red stems. They grew on a rocky islet where hot steam rose from the ground. Ethan moved closer. The system opened a panel. Firegrass. Fire element +3. Aggression trait +1. Mutagenic potential 7 out of 10. Compatibility with F-rank slime, high. Recommended evolutionary branch, lava line. Ethan gathered as much as he could carry, 22 stalks. He wrapped them in his shirt and tied them in a knot. Then he headed toward the chapel. The ruin stood on a small hill in the middle of the swamp. The stone walls were overgrown with moss. The roof had caved in. But inside, in the stone basin, there was water. Transparent, clear, odorless. In the middle of the swamp, where everything reeked of rot, this water was like a piece of another world. The system highlighted it. Holy water. Light element +4. Property, consecration. Mutagenic potential, 8 out of 10. Compatibility with F-rank slime, high. Recommended evolution branch, healing line. Ethan filled a clay bottle he'd found in the chapel with the water. Then he noticed something else. Behind the chapel, in a pit, lay a pile of bones. Old, yellowed. Rusty armor and a broken sword lay nearby. Someone had died here a long time ago. The system highlighted the bones. Bone meal. Earth element +2. Fortification property, high mineral value. Suitable for the massive growth branch. Ethan gathered the bones into a bag. Then he returned to the hut. The walk back took an hour and a half. He was so tired his legs were giving out, but a plan was already taking shape in his mind. 3 slugs, 3 different diets, 3 different paths of evolution. The problem was that he had only 1 slug. Ethan placed his catch on the table. Fireweed, holy water, bones. Then he went out to the swamp. He needed 2 more slugs. Catching a slug turned out to be easier than he thought. These creatures were everywhere. They sat in puddles, hid under rocks, chewed on moss. No one bothered them because no one needed them. Ethan caught 2 in half an hour. One was slightly larger than the first, greenish with a yellow tinge. The second was very small, almost transparent. Both bubbled in his hands and offered no resistance. He brought them to the pen. Now he had 3 slugs, 3 brass coins, a pile of ingredients, and 60 days, which he hadn't yet fully grasped. Ethan divided the pen into 3 sections with stones. He placed the first slug in the left section. He chopped the fireweed finely. He mixed it with swamp water. The result was a reddish porridge. The first slug began to eat. The system issued a notification. The basic fire diet has been activated. The fire element is beginning to accumulate. Evolution progress, 1%. Estimated time until E-rank transition, 6 days with consistent feeding. Ethan placed the second slug in the middle section. He poured holy water into a stone hollow. The slug crawled over and began to absorb it. Its body became slightly lighter in color. The system reacted. The consecrated diet was activated. The light element is beginning to accumulate. Evolution progress, 1%. Estimated time until E-rank transition, 6 days. Ethan gave the third slug everything else: bone meal, marsh moss, and pieces of a dead rat from the table. Minerals he found near the chapel. The idea was simple: overfeed it. Give it as much mass and minerals as possible. Not quality, but quantity. The system highlighted the message. Massive diet activated. Giant growth branch. Progress, 1%. Estimated time, 5 days. Ethan sat on the floor and watched the 3 slimes in their 3 sections. A reddish mush, clear water, a jumble of everything. 3 experiments at once. In the past. No, in the knowledge he carried in his head. He remembered that he had bred a strain of cows that produced 18% more milk. 3 years of work. Diet monitoring. Genetic analysis. Thousands of measurements. The result: breed number 417. The best in the state. And now, the same principles. A different world. Different creatures, but the principle is the same. You don't improve a species by force. You improve it through care, proper nutrition, patience, attention to every variable. Ethan spent the next 5 days following a routine he knew all too well. Up before dawn, feeding, measurements, gathering ingredients, feeding, measurements, repairing the hut, feeding, measurements, sleep. He wandered through the swamp for hours. He found new herbs, new minerals. Each one was highlighted by the system. He planned out diets in his head, combined elements, tracked progress. The first slug on the fiery grass changed faster than any of the others. On the second day, its body turned pink. On the third, thin orange veins began to run across its surface. On the fourth, it started leaving warm traces on the rocks. Its body temperature rose by the hour. Evolutionary progress. 40%, 50, 60. The second slug on the holy water was changing differently, more quietly, more gently. Its body grew lighter day by day. It turned from greenish to milky, then pearlescent. On the fourth day, Ethan cut his finger on a rock. Blood dripped onto the slug, and the cut healed. It simply closed up in 10 seconds. Ethan looked at his finger, then at the slug, then back at his finger. The system confirmed it. Healing potential activated. Passive regeneration within the radius of contact. The third slug just kept growing. It devoured everything in sight and grew. On the second day, it was the size of a cat. On the fourth, the size of a small dog. Dull, slow. But when Ethan accidentally dropped a heavy stone on it, the slug didn't even flinch. The rock bounced off. On the 5th day, everything changed. Ethan was feeding the fiery slug its morning portion when it suddenly began to tremble. Its entire body pulsed. The veins on its surface flared bright orange. The temperature in the pen spiked so high that Ethan jerked his hand away. The system blared with notifications. Evolution progress, 100%. Transition activated. F-rank slug. Lava line. Evolution into an E-rank lava guardian. The slug doubled in size in 10 seconds. Its body turned dark red with veins of molten magma. Its 2 murky eyes turned into 2 bright orange flames. It left charred marks on the rocks. The air around it sizzled with heat. Ethan stood and watched. His heart was pounding. It was working. It was really working. An hour later, the second one evolved. Quietly, without any flashes. It simply turned pearl white. It grew slightly larger, and the air around it began to smell of something pure, like fresh snow. An E-rank healer slug. Passive regeneration within a 2-meter radius. Active healing upon contact. Wound healing time, 3 minutes. The third one evolved by evening. No beauty, no special effects. It simply grew to the size of a calf. A D-rank giant sack. HP 400. Defense 32. Intelligence 2. Attack 4. Dumb as a stump. But it withstood a blow from a battle axe. Ethan stood in front of the pen and looked at his 3, red with veins of magma, white with a pearlescent sheen.
huge and dumb. 6 days ago, they had been 3 fist-sized blobs of slime. The system generated a summary report. Care points, +12. Tree of evolution. New branches unlocked, 6. Overall farm progress, 2%. Farm rank, F-. Ethan smirked. F-, the lowest possible. But yesterday he had 0, and tomorrow there would be more. He knew that for sure, because he knew the formula, and the formula worked. On the 7th day, a visitor came to the farm.
Ethan was cleaning the pen when he heard footsteps. Light, cautious. He turned around. A young woman was standing by the crooked fence. Her braid reached her waist. She wore gloves despite the warm day. A basket of herbs rested on the crook of her elbow. Her eyes were large, alert, like a deer's before it leaps. She said her name was Leah Pack, that she was an herbalist from the village, that she'd heard from the village elder about the new resident of the marsh and had come to offer herbs for sale. Ethan looked at the basket. The system instantly highlighted the contents. Moon sage, element, light +2, property, calming, mutagenic potential, 5 out of 10. Iron oak root, element, earth +3, property, fortification, compatibility with giants. High, swamp lavender, element, water +2, property, purification. 3 ingredients he didn't have. 2 of them fit perfectly into their current diets. Ethan said he'd buy everything. Leah named the price, 8 copper coins per bunch. He pulled out a silver coin, the only one left after buying a sack of basic feed. Leah looked at the coin, then at him, then at the hut with sedge patches on the roof. She said she didn't have any change. Ethan replied that he didn't need change. She should bring more, every day. Whatever she could find, he would buy it. Leah tucked the coin into her apron pocket. Then she looked over his shoulder, and froze. The lava guardian was sitting in the pen, red, veined with magma. The air above it shimmered with heat. Leah took a step back. The basket swayed. Her face went pale. Ethan saw her gloved hands clench. He knew from others' memories that 10 years ago, in this village, a mutant slug had killed a boy. He didn't know that this boy was Leah's brother, but he saw the fear on her face. Not surprise, not curiosity. Fear, pure, childlike, deep. Ethan did the only right thing. He didn't try to explain. He didn't try to persuade her. He simply walked over to the healer. The pearl-white slime creature sat in the middle section, pulsing quietly. Ethan pulled out a knife and slowly ran it across his palm. Blood oozed out in a bright line. Leah gasped. Ethan placed his bloodied palm on the healer. The slug glowed more softly. The wound began to close. The edges drew together. The bleeding stopped. A minute later, only a thin pink line remained on his palm. Another minute later, that disappeared too. Leah stood with her mouth agape. The basket fell from her hands. The herbs scattered across the mud. She didn't move. She just stared at his palm, then at the slug, then back at his palm. Ethan said that this slug had healing powers, that its slime healed cuts in 3 minutes, that if they developed it further, it could heal broken bones, diseases, maybe even poisons. Leah picked up the basket. Her hands were shaking. She asked quietly, almost in a whisper, how he'd done it. Ethan answered simply, the right diet, holy water from the chapel, 6 days of regular feeding, nothing more. Leah was silent for a long time. Then she said she'd come back tomorrow with some herbs, and she walked down the path toward the village. But Ethan noticed. Before leaving, she turned around and looked, not at him, at the healer. And in her eyes, fear mingled with something else, with hope. The system issued a notification. Witness trust scale. Leah Pack. Shock +8. Favor +5. Current level 3.
Threshold 10. First fearless contact with a monster. Ethan dismissed the notification and went back to work. Leah came the next day, and the next.
And the next. Each time with a basket. Each time wearing gloves. Each time she stopped at the fence and looked at the slug from a distance. She didn't approach. But she didn't leave right away either. On his 10th day of farming, Ethan asked her to help feed the healer. Leah stood 3 steps away from the pen. Her hands, still in gloves, clutched a bowl of moon sage. Ethan waited. He didn't rush her. Leah took a step, then another, then a third. Then she set the bowl down in front of the healer. The slug crawled over. It touched her glove. Leah flinched, but she didn't back away. The healer pulsed softly, a warm, pearly light, the scent of fresh snow. Leah stood motionless. Then she slowly removed one glove. She held out her bare hand. She touched the slug's surface. Her fingers sank into the pearly mass. The healer glowed brighter. A wave of warmth washed over Leah's hand. An old scar on her wrist. Thin, white. It vanished in 15 seconds. Leah stared at her wrist. Where the scar had been, there was smooth skin. She didn't say anything. She just stood there and looked. Then she sat down on the ground next to the pen and began to cry. Quietly, silently. Tears streamed down her cheeks and dripped into the mud. Ethan sat down beside her. Silently. He didn't touch her. He didn't comfort her. He just sat there. The system displayed a notification. Leah Pack. Favor. 10. Threshold reached. First fearless touch of a monster. Unlocked. Ethan closed the notification. An hour later, Leah stood up. She wiped her face. She put on a glove. She said she'd bring something special tomorrow, a rare mushroom that grows only deep in the swamp, and she left. On the 12th day, she arrived with the mushroom. The system highlighted it before Leah even stepped through the gate. Moonlight mushroom. Elementment, light +6. Property, regeneration. Mutagenic potential, 9 out of 10. Rarity, exceptional. Compatibility with the healer, critically high. Ethan felt his heart race. This mushroom could raise the healer's rank by an entire level, from E to D. One ingredient, one leap forward. Leah said she found it by an old stump on the southern edge of the swamp, that her mother knew where they grew, that her mother used to sing songs about moon mushrooms when Leah was little. Ethan asked what kind of songs. Leah frowned. She said she didn't remember the words, just the melody, something about roots and light, about how the earth nourishes the sky. Strange songs. Ethan remembered that. Then he fed the mushroom to the healer. The slime absorbed it in seconds and began to grow. Slowly but noticeably, the pearlescent glow intensified. The system showed progress. Evolution toward D rank, 40%. Ethan spent the whole day experimenting with the lava guardian. Fireweed strengthened it, but only slowly. A catalyst was needed, something with a high fire element and the aggression trait. The system suggested it. A lava stone, found in the hot springs on the eastern edge of the swamp. Fire element +5, aggression trait +3. Ethan headed east. The hot springs turned out to be 3 pools of bubbling water. Steam rose in plumes. At the bottom of one of the pools lay stones. Red, hot. Ethan burned his fingers when he picked up the first one. Then he figured out to use a stick. He retrieved 4 stones. He carried them back to the farm. He fed 2 to the guardian. His progress toward D rank jumped from 0 to 30%. The system updated the stats. E rank Lava Guardian, HP 120, Attack 27, Defense 9, Ability, Fire Spit, Range 3 meters, Damage 40, Cooldown 10 seconds. Ethan memorized all the numbers, a habit from that other life. Breed number 417, weight, milk yield, milk fat content, calf survival rate. Numbers instead of adjectives, that's more accurate. On the 13th day, another visitor arrived at the farm. Heavy, loud, smelling of sweat and cheap ale. Bart Toller, The village tax collector, a short man with a red face and small eyes, 2 thugs with clubs followed him. Bart stopped at the fence. He surveyed the shack, the pen, slime, and he smirked. He said that Ethan owed 5 gold pieces for using state land. Ethan replied that the swamp wasn't state land, that it abandoned and belongs to no one. Bart said that now it does, as of this very moment, and that if Ethan doesn't pay by evening, he'll be evicted, and his slime will be crushed, as it should be, because breeding monsters without a license is a misdemeanor. People were gathering behind the fence. Villagers. Some came over to watch the commotion, others brought neighbors along. About 10 people stood there watching. Ethan saw their faces, tired, indifferent. They knew Bart. They knew he was taking more than he was supposed to, but no one could do anything about it. Bart had been appointed as the tract official. He was backed by the county office, but the county was far away and it didn't care. Ethan looked at Bart, then at the villagers behind the fence. Then he made up his mind. He walked over to the pen containing the lava guardian. The red slime pulsed with heat. The air shimmered. Ethan plunged his hand into the acidic slime on the guardian's surface. Bart and the thugs watched. The peasants watched. His hand sank into the acid up to his wrist. Nothing happened. His hand was unharmed. The system was working. Protection for the owner against his own pet. A basic function. But Bart didn't know that. He saw a man dip his hand into a creature that melts stone, and his hand remained unharmed. Bart turned pale. Then Ethan pulled out a knife, the same one he'd used to cut his finger in front of Leah. He slowly ran it across his palm, deeper than last time. Blood trickled down his fingers. It dripped onto the ground. Bart swallowed hard. The thugs exchanged glances. Ethan placed his bloodied palm on the healer. A pearly light. The wound closed. A minute later, there was no trace left on his palm. Silence. Bart stood with his mouth agape. The tax demand scroll slipped from his fingers. It fell into the mud. One of the peasants behind the fence crossed himself. Another sat down on the ground. The system issued a cascade of notifications. Witness trust scale. Bart Toller. Shock plus 15. Peasant 1. Shock plus 5. Peasant 2. Shock plus 5. Peasant 3. Shock plus 5. Total shock plus 50. The symbiotic evolution branch has been unlocked. Reputation in the village plus 1. Ethan looked at Bart. Bart took a step back, then another. Ethan spoke calmly. He said he'd opened a pharmacy. The first vial of healing slime is free. For everyone in the village. Cuts, burns, old wounds. Anything that hurts. Free. Then he looked at Bart and added. He said he'd pay the tax. When he had the means. In the meantime, Bart could relay to the office that a farmer lived in Dead Root Swamp who had a creature capable of healing wounds in a minute. On the 14th day, a rider on a government horse arrived at the farm. Young, straight back. He was wearing a border guard uniform, a gray cloak bearing the crown's coat of arms. A lieutenant. He tied his horse to a post by the gate and walked toward the village, not toward the farm. Ethan saw him from the roof of his hut, where he was patching yet another hole. An hour later, he learned from the village elder what had happened. The lieutenant gathered the villagers in the square and spoke plainly. He announced that the Stone Fang Orc army was advancing from the north, 3,200 warriors under the command of a single chieftain. For the first time in 300 years, the royal army was converging on the capital. The Dragon Knights were blocking the main roads, and the village lay on the edge of the Dead Root Swamp. It was on the evacuation list, but there will be no reinforcements. There will be no transportation. Evacuation means only one thing: run on your own, wherever you want. The lieutenant said this, staring at the ground. The village elder was crying. The peasants stood in silence. They knew there was nowhere to run. It's a 3-day walk to the nearest town. Half of them are elderly people who won't make it. A quarter are children who won't survive the journey, to leave their homes behind. Livestock, fields, everything they had, and arrive in a town where no one was waiting for them, where they would become beggars on the streets. The lieutenant left. He left a scroll with an official seal on the village headman's table, an evacuation notice, a piece of paper that absolved the crown of responsibility for their deaths. Ethan stood by the fence and listened as the village headman relayed the news to the neighbors. 60 days. No, already 55. 5 days had passed since his arrival. He counted in his head. 3,200 orcs, 40 shamans, 6 chieftains, against a village of 42 households, 80 adults, of whom maybe 10 know how to fight. The rest are peasants, plowmen, milkmaids, shepherds, against an army that hadn't lost a single battle in 300 years. Ethan closed his eyes. The system pulsed in his head. 47 lines of evolution, 12 unlocked, 3 pets, 1 E rank, 1 E rank, 1 D rank. That wouldn't even be enough for 10 orcs. He needed more slugs, more ingredients, more time. He didn't have any time, but slugs were everywhere. The swamp was teeming with them. Ethan got started that very evening. He went out with a bucket and a lantern and caught 15 slugs in 3 hours. Small ones, weak ones, all F rank, but 15. He divided the pen into new sections. 5 slugs went to the fire-based diet, 5 to the heavy-duty diet, 3 to the water-based diet. He set 2 set aside for experiments. His supply of fireweed was running out. He had 3 days' worth of holy water left. There were no more bones. He needed resources. A lot of them. Fast. On the 15th day, Ethan went to the village. For the first time. The village was called Deadroot, just like the swamp. 30 houses along a single street. A well in the middle. A blacksmith shop on the edge. The village headman's shop. A small chapel. Ethan walked down the street and people looked at him. Not like before. Not like he was a stranger. An old man with straight fingers bowed. A woman by the well smiled. A little boy showed his mother his hand without the wart. The healer had removed it yesterday. Ethan reached the blacksmith shop. The door was open. Inside, a hammer clanging. A woman stood at the anvil. Broad shoulders, strong arms, her hair tucked under a headscarf, her face red from the heat. Mina Sun, the blacksmith's widow, the only blacksmith in the village. Ethan walked in and said he needed pens, metal ones, 12 of them, and feeders, automatic ones if possible, and an incubator for slug eggs, if slugs even lay eggs at all. Mina looked at him, then she laughed, loudly, heartily. She said he was the first person in 2 years to walk into the smithy with an order rather than a threat over debts. Then she asked how he would pay. Ethan said he had nothing to pay with, but he could offer something else. Healing slime. For her clients, for the whole village. Free treatment in exchange for work. Mina stopped laughing. She looked at him seriously. Then she said her back hurt. Every day. Ever since her husband died and she's been swinging the hammer herself. Her vertebrae, her muscles, everything. Ethan nodded. He led her to the farm. He placed her against the healer. 20 minutes. Mina stood up with her back straight. For the first time in 2 years, she rolled her shoulders, bent over, squatted down. Nothing hurt. She looked at Ethan with a long, lingering gaze. Then she said the pens would be ready in 3 days, feeding troughs in 5. We'd have to think about the incubator. Mina became their second ally. She worked quickly, precisely, the hands of a blacksmith, the eye of an engineer. 3 days later, 12 metal pens stood on the farm, neat, sturdy, with drainage for the slime. 5 days later, the feeders appeared. Simple but effective. A stone bowl on the stand with a trough for water. The slime could eat on its own. There was no need to feed them by hand. Ethan scaled up the operation. 15 slimes were eating and growing. 5 on the fiery diet began to change color on the 3rd day. Pink streaks, orange sparks. A week later, all 5 became E-rank lava guards. 5 fire slugs, 5 fire spits. Range 3 meters, damage 40, cooldown 10 seconds. The 5 massive slugs grew more slowly, but by the 20th day, 3 of them had become D-rank giant sacks. 2 lagged behind. Their diet was incomplete. They lacked minerals. The water slugs evolved into something new. The system called it an E-rank swamp slither. Waterline, ability, acid wave. Range 5 meters. Damage is low, 15, but it slows the target by 3 seconds. Ethan looked at his growing arsenal and thought. 8 guardians, including the first. 4 giants, including the first. 3 sliders, 1 healer, 16 monsters, against 3,200 orcs. He did the math. If each guardian fires a fire spit every 10 seconds, 8 guardians, 40 damage per spit, that's 320 damage every 10 seconds. But an orc warrior has HP ranging from 100 to 300, a chieftain has 500 to 1000, a shaman's HP is unknown, but definitely over 100. 320 damage in 10 seconds equals 1 dead orc, 6 orcs per minute, 360 per hour, 3,200 orcs, 9 hours of non-stop combat, no casualties, no fatigue, no mistakes, impossible. He needed titans, not E rank, not D rank, C rank at a minimum, creatures capable of wiping out dozens with a single blow. The system showed the paths. An E rank lava guardian could evolve further, into a D rank lava titan, then into a C rank magma colossus, but each evolution required rare ingredients, high-grade elements, time. On the 20th day, something happened that changed everything. Ethan was experimenting with the 2 remaining slugs, the ones he'd set aside for his experiments. He had an ingredient that Leah had found 3 days earlier, a tear of the ancient tree, a drop of amber resin from a 1,000-year-old oak at the far edge of the swamp. Leah had said that her mother used to take her to that tree when she was a child, that the tree was enormous, that her mother used to sing songs to it. The system highlighted the ingredient. A tear of the ancient tree, life element plus 10, property awakening, mutagenic potential 10 out of 10, maximum, rarity legendary, compatibility with F-rank slime unknown, recommended method mutation lottery. Ethan stared at these numbers. Life element plus 10, maximum mutagenic potential, legendary rarity, and the mutation lottery. The system was suggesting he take a risk. Once a week, Ethan could feed a rare ingredient to the slime and spin the wheel. 3 out of 8 possible outcomes. Failure meant the slime's death. Success meant a rare branch that couldn't be obtained through normal feeding. Ethan held a drop of amber resin in the palm of his hand, small, warm, like a drop of sunshine. Standing nearby was Yuki Chi. She'd shown up 2 days ago, petite, disheveled, with a notebook pressed to her chest, a runaway student from the Academy of Magic. Specialization, evolutionary theory of monsters. She'd been expelled for her heretical theory that monsters could evolve through feeding. She'd heard rumors of a farm where slugs became guardians and healers. She'd walked here for 3 days, hungry, soaked, with burning eyes. She looked at the drop and said the chance of success was 3%, that Ethan risked losing his only legendary ingredient, that, from a scientific point of view, it was madness. Then she added that, from a scientific point of view, everything happening on this farm was madness, and that she wanted to see the result. Ethan placed the drop in front of the slime. Small, transparent, the most ordinary kind. The slime touched the drop, absorbed it. The system spun the drum. 8 sectors, 7 red, 1 gold. Red, failure. The slime dies. Gold, critical success. The smart slime class. Class, rational slug. The drum began to spin. Yuki clutched her notebook. Leah pressed her hands to her chest. Mina stopped with a hammer in her hand by the new pen. The drum spun. The sectors flashed by. Red, 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 gold, red, red, red. Slow down. Red, gold, stop, gold. The system exploded with notifications. Critical success. The intelligent slime class has been unlocked. 200 new evolutionary branches have been opened. Ethan stared at the slime. The small lump began to grow. Slowly, its shape changed, from a shapeless sphere into something elongated, then into something resembling a silhouette. Then, A girl stood before him. She looked to be 20 years old. Her skin was translucent and pearlescent. Her eyes were the color of aquamarine. Her hair flowed like streams of molten silver. She blinked. She looked at Ethan, and she said one word. She called him father. Yuki fainted. The notebook flew into the mud. Leah covered her mouth with her hands. Mina dropped the hammer on her foot and didn't notice. Celeste Vaughn, who was standing by the fence with a rapier at her belt, grabbed her weapon. She had arrived at the farm 5 days ago, the youngest daughter of an impoverished knightly family. She had run away from home to become a hunter. She'd come to hire herself out as a swordswoman, proud, sharp-tongued. She called Ethan a farmer with a contempt that barely concealed her curiosity. Ethan paid her in silver. She replied that she paid with her pride. And now she stood with her hand on her rapier, staring at the creature who had just called a human father. Ethan slowly reached out his hand. The slime girl touched his fingers. Her skin was warm, soft, alive. The system issued a card. Abby. Class, Intelligent Slime. Rank, C. Starting rank, C. HP, 2,400. Attack, 80. Defense, 45. Intelligence, 90. Abilities, Wave of Fission. Symbiotic Shield. Empathetic Bond. Unlocked Evolutionary Branches, 200. Affection, 100. Unconditional Attachment from Birth. Ethan looked at the numbers. C rank, starting. HP 2,400? That's 20 times more than the Lava Guardians. Attack 80. That's 3 times more. He looked at Abby. She was smiling. A simple, pure smile of a creature that had just been born and was seeing the world for the first time. Ethan told her his name was Ethan, that this was her home, that it was safe here. Abby nodded. Then she looked at the Lava Guardian in the pen. She walked over. She touched him. The Guardian growled, for the first time ever. Then she looked at the healer. She touched him. The healer glowed brighter. Then she looked at the giant. She stroked his enormous side. The giant stopped chewing and froze. Yuki woke up on the ground. She picked up her notebook. She opened a blank page. She began writing so fast that the pen tore through the paper. She muttered under her breath that this was impossible, that it turned the entire theory of monster evolution on its head, that the Academy had been wrong, that she had been right, that she needed to write everything down, right now, every detail. That evening, Ethan sat on the porch of the cabin. Abby sat next to him. She gazed at the stars. She pointed at every bright spot and asked what it was. On the 21st day, Ethan woke up to the sound of the system screeching in his head. A red notification. An alert. Fret scale. Hostile entities detected within a 500-meter radius. Number, 22. Type, humans. Armed. Intent, hostile. He jumped out of bed. Abby was sitting by the door. Her eyes were shining brighter than usual. She said she could sense evil people. Lots of them. With weapons. Ethan stepped out onto the porch. Dawn was just breaking. A gray sky. Fog over the swamp. And figures were emerging from the fog. 20 men. Leather armor. Short swords. Shields. Mercenaries. Cheap ones. Third rate. Bart Toller was leading the way. A red face. Small eyes. But now there was no cowardice in them. There was anger. He stopped 30 paces from the fence. He shouted that Ethan had humiliated him in front of the whole village, that now he would pay, that the farm would be burned down and the slugs crushed, and that the mercenaries had been paid for every head. Ethan stood on the porch, barefoot, in a shirt, without a weapon. His combat stats hadn't changed in 3 weeks. Strength 2 out of 100. He couldn't raise a sword and fight, but he didn't need to. He turned toward the pens. 8 lava guards sat in a line, red, hot. Veins of magma pulsed in the morning light. 4 sack giants stood behind them, each the size of a calf. 3 swamp sliders swayed at the water's edge. The healer glowed softly in the center. And Abby. Abby stood next with Ethan, translucent skin,
aquamarine eyes. She looked at the mercenaries with the curiosity of a child seeing something incomprehensible for the first time. But yesterday, Ethan realized something.
Abby could sense intentions, an empathic connection, one of her abilities. She sensed hostility like a scent, and now she sensed the scent of death. Her eyes lost their curiosity. They grew cold. The system issued a notification. Abby, defense mode activated. Combat stats increased by 20%. Reason, threat to the farm owner. But Ethan didn't want to use Abby. Not in this fight. Not against 20 mercenaries with short swords. It was beneath her, and he didn't want her to kill. Not yet. Ethan gave the Guardians a command, a mental one. The system allowed him to issue orders via the empathic link. 8 lava guards turned toward the fence. 16 orange eyes flashed in the fog. The mercenaries slowed down. The front row stopped. They saw red slugs the size of a large dog. They saw veins of magma. They felt the heat on their faces from 30 paces away. Bart shouted for them not to stop, that they were just slugs, that the slugs weren't dangerous, that he'd been promised it would be easy. 2 mercenaries in the front row exchanged glances. One of them stepped forward. He raised his sword. He stepped over the fence. Ethan gave a second command. The first Guardian spat. A fiery spit. A red glob of acid fire flew 3 meters and struck the ground in front of the mercenary. The rock cracked. The mud boiled. A column of steam and smoke rose 2 meters. The mercenary jumped back. His boots were smoking. He looked at the melted stone, then at the slug. Then he dropped his sword. He turned and ran. Bart bellowed. He ordered them to shoot their bows. 3 mercenaries in the back row raised their bows. Arrows flew toward the farm. Ethan flinched. An arrow was heading straight for him. Abby stepped forward. Her hand rose. Symbiotic shield. A translucent wall of pearlescent light rose in front of the work. 3 arrows struck the shield and dissolved. They simply vanished, like sticks thrown into acid. Silence. The archers lowered their bows. Ethan looked at Abby. She stood with her hand raised, calm. The shield slowly faded. Ethan gave the third command. All 8 guardians, simultaneously. A volley. 8 fiery bursts struck the ground in front of the mercenaries' formation. A line of fire, 3 meters long. The mud boiled. Stones melted. Smoke rose in a wall. The mercenaries retreated 10 paces, then another 10. Then they ran. First the rear ones, then the middle ones, then the front ones. 30 seconds later, only Bart remained standing in the field in front of the farm, alone, with a sword in his trembling hand. His red face turned white. His small eyes darted about. He looked at the 8 red slugs and realized that any one of them could kill him with a single spit. Ethan came down from the porch. He walked over to the fence. He looked at Bart. Bart dropped his sword. He fell to his knees. He began to beg for forgiveness. He said he'd been forced into it, that he owed money, that he hadn't hired the mercenaries, that it had been someone from town's idea. Ethan listened. Then he said one thing. He said Bart could leave, right now, and never return to the farm. Never. But if he came back, if any of his men came back, the guards wouldn't shoot into the ground. Bart stood up, turned around, and ran, without looking back. He stumbled, fell face first into the mud, got up, ran again. He vanished into the fog. The system issued a cascade of notifications, the witness trust scale. But there were more witnesses than just the mercenaries. People were standing behind the fence on the other side of the farm. Peasants, about 20 of them. They'd come that morning for the healing slime and had seen everything. An old man with straight fingers, a woman by the well, a boy without a wart. They stood and watched as 8 slugs the size of dogs put 20 armed mercenaries to flight, without a single drop of blood. Shock plus 300. Reputation in the village plus 5. Current reputation level 6. Threshold 10. The village recognizes Ethan as their protector. Ethan closed the notifications. He looked at the villagers. They stood in silence. Then the old man took off his hat. He bowed, deeply. The woman by the well bowed. The boy bowed. One by one,
20 people bowed to the farmer from the swamp. Ethan didn't know what to say. Abby took his hand. Her fingers were warm. She said the people were grateful, that she could feel them, that they were afraid, but they believed. Ethan nodded. Then he went back to work, because there was more work than there was time. In the afternoon, Roan Lee arrived, on horseback, in a border guard uniform, a gray raincoat, a short haircut, an expressionless face. She tied her horse to the gate. She entered the farm. She inspected the pens, the guards, the giants, the slitherers.
The healer. Abby. She looked at Abby for a long time, then she turned to Ethan. She said she was the commander of the border patrol, or rather, the former commander. The patrol had been wiped out in a skirmish with an orc advance party 2 weeks ago. She was the only survivor. She had been sent to the village with evacuation orders. That same lieutenant who had come earlier was her subordinate. She had delayed her return because she'd heard about a farmer in the swamp whose slugs spit fire and heal wounds. She said she'd come to take a look, and she did. Then she asked how many fighters Ethan had. Ethan replied, 8 E-rank guardians, 4 D-rank giants, 3 E-rank sliders, 1 E-rank healer, 1 C-rank intelligent slug, a total of 16 monsters, plus 1 swordswoman, Celeste, and 1 former commander, if she stays. Roan was silent for a long time. Then she said it was hopeless, that 16 slimes against 3,200 orcs was suicide, that she'd seen orcs in battle, that a single stone fang chieftain is worth 10 knights, that it would be wiser to leave. Ethan asked where. Roan didn't answer. Ethan said there were 80 people in the village who couldn't leave. The elderly, the children, the sick, they would stay, and he would stay with them. And in 39 days, when the orcs arrive, there won't be 16 slugs standing at the threshold. He looked at the swamp, at the dozens of small bubbling lumps in the puddles and under the rocks. Then he said there would be an army standing there. Rowan looked at him, at his gaunt body, at his hands, without a warrior's calluses, at his bare feet in the mud. Then she looked at the 8 guardians who had lined up in a row and were staring at her with 16 orange eyes, at Abby, who was standing next to Ethan and holding his hand. Rowan took off her helmet. For the first time in front of Ethan. Short hair, a scar running from his temple to his chin, tired eyes. She said she would stay. The system issued a notification. Rowan Lee. Favorability. 10. Threshold reached. First time removing her helmet. Ethan nodded. It was noisy at the farm that evening. Leah was cooking dinner with herbs and something that looked like local potatoes. Mina was fixing the fence and cursing at the nails. Yuki was writing in her notebook so fast it seemed as if she had 3 hands. Celeste was sharpening her rapier and pretending not to care, but her eyes were following Abby, who was walking between the pens and petting each slug. Rowan sat in the corner, upright, silent, staring at the wall. Ethan stood in the middle of it all and fought. 6 people, 16 monsters, 39 days, 3,200 orcs. He sat down at the table. Rowan sat down across from him. She unfolded a map, a real military map with markings on it. She pointed out the orcs' route, from the north through the forest, over the pass, along the wide road toward the tractor towns. The village of Deadroot lay right at the very edge of that route. The orcs could have bypassed it. They could have, but they didn't. The orcs of Stone Fang were burning everything in their path. That was their tactic. No villages spared, no enemies left behind. Total annihilation. Rowan spoke calmly, like an officer giving a report. 3,200 warriors. Of those, 2,000 were infantry, 400 archers, 300 cavalrymen on war boars, 100 elite swordsmen, 40 shamans, 6 chieftains, 1 supreme chieftain, Grimdall Stonefang, the one who united the orcs for the first time in 300 years. They say he broke a mountain troll's spine with his bare hands. They say his shamans can raise the dead. They say he takes no prisoners. Rowan finished speaking and looked at Ethan. She waited for his reaction. Ethan was silent. He looked at the map, then at the swamp outside the window, Then he said he needed more slugs, a lot more, and he needed titans. Rowan asked what titans were. Ethan explained. An E-rank lava guardian can evolve into a D-rank lava titan, then into a C-rank magma colossus. A C-rank creature has HP ranging from 2 to 5,000. Its attack power ranges from 100 to 300. A single such creature can wipe out 100 infantrymen. Rowan asked how many titans he needed. Ethan did the math in his head. At least 12 C-rank, plus 50 D-rank for support, plus 100 E-rank for the front lines, plus 20 healers for the field hospital, plus Abby. Rowan looked at him as if he were crazy. Then she said it was impossible to do that in 39 days. Ethan replied that in the past no, that he knew a thing or two about scaling up production, that he needed only one thing: resources, herbs, minerals, rare ingredients, lots of them, every day. He turned to Leah. Leah nodded. To Mina. Mina slammed her fist on the table and said there would be pens. To Yuki. Yuki picked up her notebook and said she'd calculate the optimal rations for each evolutionary line. To Celeste. Celeste shrugged and said she was a swordswoman, not a farmer. But then she added that she could go into the forest to hunt. Monster meat is an ingredient too. To Roan. Roan put her helmet back on. She said she'd draw up a defense plan, positions, lines of retreat, ambush points. If Ethan had an army, she'd have a strategy. Ethan looked at them. 6 women, a herbalist, a blacksmith, a scholar, a swordswoman, a commander, and Abby, who was sitting on the floor playing with a little slime, tossing it up in her palm. 6 women and a farmer from the swamp. Against the Orc Empire. The system pulsed quietly at the edge of her vision. Day 21. 39 days left. The countdown had begun. For the next 10 days, Ethan slept no more than 4 hours a day. Up before dawn. Feeding, gathering, feeding, measurements, gathering, feeding, measurements, sleep. Repeat. The swamp became his laboratory. Every rock, every root, every puddle. The system illuminated everything, and Ethan collected it all. Yuki calculated the optimal rations for the 3 main lines. The fire line required fire grass plus lava rock plus the blood of a swamp lizard. Celeste hunted lizards every morning. She brought back 5 at a time. At first, with disgust, then with enthusiasm. On the 4th day of hunting, she brought back 8 and tossed the bag by the pen, as if it had cost her nothing. But Ethan noticed she was out of breath. The massive spell required bone meal, iron ore, and clay from the riverbed. Mina arranged for a supply of ore from an old mine a 2-hour walk from the village. The mine had been abandoned 20 years ago when the vein dried up, but Mina knew there were still chunks of rock left there with a high iron content. She went there every other day. She'd return with a sack on her back, a heavy one, weighing 30 kilos. When Ethan asked how she managed to carry it, Mina replied that 2 years of swinging a hammer all by herself turns a woman into a mule. Then she laughed so hard that the slugs in the pens bubbled from the vibration. The water required holy water, river pearls, and moon moss. Leah found the pearls at the bottom of the stream behind the chapel. They were small and murky, but the system rated them as water element +4. Moon moss grew only at night. Leah went to the swamp with a lantern and gathered it in the dark. Ethan said it was dangerous. Leah replied that she'd grown up in that swamp and knew every bump in the ground. Then she added quietly that she liked walking at night, that the swamp was beautiful when it was silent. Ethan said nothing, but the next night he sent one guardian with her. A red slime crawled alongside them, lighting the path with streaks of magma. At first, Leah walked 3 steps behind him. An hour later, she was right beside him. By the 30th day, there were 47 monsters on the farm, 12 E-rank lava guards, 6 D-rank sack giants, 5 E-rank swamp slugs, 4 E-rank healers rank, 1 C-rank intelligent slime, and 19 new slimes at various stages of growth, but not a single titan. The problem lay in the transition from E-rank to D-rank. The guards had hit a ceiling. Fire grass and lava stone provided steady growth, but it was too slow. According to Yuki's estimates, with the current diet, 1 guardian would reach D rank in 40 days. Ethan didn't have 40 days. He had 29. Yuki suggested a catalyst, a substance with high mutagenic potential that accelerates the transition between ranks. The problem was that such substances were rare. The tear of the ancient tree was one of them, but a second drop hadn't appeared on the tree. Ethan checked every day. Yuki pored over her notebook for 3 nights in a row. On the 4th night, she came to Ethan with red eyes and said she'd found it. Her notes from the academy mentioned a substance called the heart of the swamp, a concentrate of organic energy. It forms in places where the earth absorbs the life force of hundreds of creatures over the course of centuries. The dead root swamp had existed for thousands of years. Thousands of creatures had lived and died there. Their energy seeped into the soil. Yuki said that somewhere deep within the swamp there must be a place where this energy is concentrated, a place where the earth pulses. The system confirmed it. An anomalous energy signal detected. Distance 2 kilometers to the southwest. Depth 3 meters. Ethan, Yuki, and Celeste set out in the morning. Rowan stayed at the farm with a defense plan. Mina was building new pens. Leah was feeding the herd. Abby sat next to Leah and helped. She'd learned how to feed the slugs in 3 days. She did it gently, carefully. She stroked each one after they ate. Her care points grew twice as fast when Abby was feeding them. The path to the point on the map led through the most remote part of the swamp. The trees here were black, twisted, dead. The water beneath their feet wasn't green but dark brown, almost black. The stench was so bad that Yuki tied a scarf around her face. Celeste walked ahead with her rapier at the ready. She didn't complain. She never complained. But Ethan saw her wince every time she sank knee-deep into the mud. The rapier was made of ordinary steel, lightweight but not durable. Ethan had already thought about this. When properly processed, the Lava Guardian slime hardened into a material lighter than steel and stronger than stone. Mina could forge a weapon from it, but that was for later. Right now, it was the heart of the swamp. 2 hours later, they found the spot. A clearing in the midst of dead trees, round, 20 meters in diameter, and the earth here was breathing, literally. The surface rose and fell, slowly, like the chest of a sleeping giant. Yuki fell to her knees and pressed her hand against the ground. Her eyes widened. She said that the energy here was so dense that her fingers were tingling. That this wasn't just a concentration, it was a lens. The focal point of all the swamp's life energy. Thousands of years, millions of creatures. All their power was here. The system opened a panel. The heart of the swamp. Life element plus 15. Earth element plus 10. Chaos element plus 5. Property, accelerated evolution. Mutagenic potential, 10 out of 10. Effect, when added to the diet, it accelerates the transition between ranks 3-fold. Quantity, limited. Regeneration, 1 serving every 7 days. Ethan did the math. 1 serving every 7 days, 3 times faster. A Guardian's transition from E to D used to take 40 days. With the acceleration, 13. He has 29 days. So in 29 days, he can make the transition. No, 1 portion wouldn't be enough for everyone at once. 1 portion per slug. A 7-day wait. 4 portions in 29 days. 4 Guardians from E to D, but he needs 12 C-rank Titans. That wasn't enough. Yuki approached him. She saw his face. She understood. Then she said there was another way. If he upgraded 1 Guardian to D rank and then used it as a donor, a D rank Guardian produces lava condensate, a substance with fire element plus 8. If the condensate is fed to other E rank Guardians, their growth will double. Cascading evolution. 1 Titan feeds the next ones. The next ones feed the ones after them. A pyramid. Ethan looked at Yuki, then at the system. The system confirmed the calculation. Cascading evolution. Efficiency, high. Risk, moderate. Side effect, the donor loses 10% of their HP for each portion of condensate. 10%. This meant the donor was growing weaker. Every time he fed others, he lost a part of himself. Ethan stood on the pulsating ground and looked at his hands. A thought had been swirling in his head, one that had haunted him ever since Abby first called him father. Did he have the right? These creatures were alive. They trusted him, and now he was going to use one of them to raise the others, just like in that other life. Cow number 417. The best in the herd. Her milk was used to feed the calves. Her genes were passed down through generations. She gave the most of all, and they took the most from her. Celeste stood to the side and watched him. Then she said that war doesn't ask for permission, that the orcs wouldn't think about morality when they entered the village, that 80 people would die if he stood there pondering. Her voice was harsh, but her eyes weren't. Ethan dug into the ground with his knife. Half a meter down, he found it, the heart of the swamp, a lump the size of 2 fists, black, pulsating, warm, alive. He put it in a bag. Then he stood up. He said they were going back, and that the first donor would be his first guardian, that very one. The first slime he'd fed fireweed to on the second day. Kevin. He'd named him Kevin. On the way back, Yuki walked beside him, jotting down the formulas for cascading evolution in her notebook. Celeste walked ahead. She was silent. Once, she turned around and looked at Ethan. For a long time. Then she turned away. That evening, Ethan fed Kevin the first portion of the heart of the swamp. On the 30th day, Ethan woke up from the heat. Kevin's pen had become red hot. The metal walls that Mina had made from thick iron were glowing red. Ethan ran over. Kevin was pulsing. His body had doubled in size overnight. The veins of magma had grown as thick as fingers. His 2 orange eyes had turned into 2 bright suns. The stones beneath him had melted. The ground around the pen was smoking. The system issued a notification. Progress toward D rank, 100%. Transition activated. E rank Lava Guardian. Evolution to D rank Lava Titan rank. Kevin had grown. From the size of a dog to the size of a bull. His body had turned dark burgundy, almost black, cracked with liquid magma oozing from the fissures. His 2 eyes blazed like coals in a furnace. When he took his first step, the ground beneath him charred. The air around the pen grew as hot as an open furnace. The system updated the card. D rank Lava Titan, HP 800, Attack 65, Defense 30. Abilities: Enhanced Fire Spit, Range 10 meters, Damage 120, Cooldown 8 seconds. Lava Wave, Area of Effect 5 meters, Damage 80, Cooldown 20 seconds. Lava Condensate, produces 1 portion every 2 days. Fire element +8. Ethan stared at the numbers. Damage 120? Range 10 meters. Lava wave with an area of effect. This isn't a toy anymore. It's a weapon. And most importantly, lava condensate. 1 portion every 2 days. For the 24 days remaining, 12 portions. 12 guardians would gain a speed boost. The cascade was working. Ethan walked over to Kevin. The Titan lowered his head, huge and heavy. His eyes were level with Ethan's face. The heat seared his skin, but the system protected him. The owner, immunity. Ethan placed his hand on Kevin's side, hot, pulsing, like an engine running at full power. Kevin growled, a low, vibrating sound that made the walls of the pen tremble. Abby walked over. She looked at Kevin. She smiled. She said he was beautiful. Kevin growled louder. Kevin produced his first batch of condensate by evening, a dark red clot the size of an egg. Hot, pulsing. The system displayed, lava condensate, fire element +8, doubles the evolution rate of the fire line. Side effect for the donor, HP -10%. Kevin's current HP, 800, after production, 720. Ethan took the condensate and carried it to the second guardian, the largest of the 12 E-rank guardians. He fed it to him. The guardian shuddered. The veins of magma grew brighter. Progress toward D rank jumped from 20% to 50. Yuki recorded every number. Her notebook was bulging with notes. She said that at the current rate, in 12 days, Ethan would have 4 D rank titans. 4 titans meant 4 sources of condensate. 4 sources meant 8 portions every 2 days. 8 portions meant 8 guardians undergoing accelerated evolution. The pyramid was growing. By the 50th day, under ideal conditions, 12 D-rank titans. But Ethan didn't need D ranks. He needed C ranks, magma colossi. The transition from D to C required an even rarer ingredient. Yuki found it in her notes. A fire core. It forms inside volcanic rock. The nearest source, the hot springs on the eastern edge of the swamp, but not on the surface, deeper, 10 meters underground. Mina said she could dig a shaft. It would take 3 days. Rowan said she'd cover for them. Celesta said she'd go with Mina. On the 38th day, the shaft was ready. Mina dug like a machine. Celesta hauled out the dirt. Rowan stood guard. At a depth of 8 meters deep, Mina struck the rock with her pickaxe, and heat surged from the wall. Behind the rock was a cavity, a small cave the size of a room, and in the center of the cave lay stones, red, pulsating stones. The system illuminated them. Fiery core. Element, fire plus 12. Property, transformation. Mutagenic potential, 10 out of 10. Compatibility with D-rank lava titan, critically high. Recommended transformation, C-rank magma colossus. Quantity, 7. 7. Ethan stood in the scorching cave, staring at the 7 red stones. 7 fire cores. 7 potential C-rank colossi. Not 12, but 7. That changed everything. He took them all. Work was in full swing at the farm. Cascading evolution was in full swing. Kevin produced condensate every 2 days. His HP was dropping. 800, 720, 648, 583. Ethan kept an eye on the numbers. He fed Kevin a fortified diet to compensate for the losses. A double portion of fireweed, lava rock, swamp lizard blood. The meat Celeste brought. His HP was recovering, but not fully. 583 had become the ceiling. Kevin was giving up a part of himself, literally. Ethan saw how his first guardian dimmed after each serving of condensate, how the veins of magma grew thinner for a few hours, how his eyes dimmed slightly. Then he recovered. He ate, sleeps, flares up again, but each time a little weaker than before. Abby said Kevin wasn't complaining, that he wanted to help, that he knew why it was necessary. Ethan nodded, but at night he'd sit by his pen and say nothing. On the 40th day, another event occurred. The second guardian reached D rank, Lava Titan number 2, 750 HP, slightly weaker than Kevin, but faster. Condensate every 2 days. Now there were 2 sources, 4 portions every 2 days. The pyramid accelerated. On the 42nd day, the third and fourth guardians reached D rank simultaneously. 4 titans, 8 portions every 2 days. The remaining guardians were growing by leaps and bounds. On the 45th day, Ethan fed the first fire core to Kevin. The titan absorbed the red stone. His body shuddered. A sound rang out, low, deep, as if the earth were rumbling. Evan began to grow. From the size of a bull to the size of a van. His skin turned black as obsidian. Cracks opened all over his body, and liquid magma poured out of them. His 2 eyes turned into 2 lakes of molten gold. The ground beneath him caved in 1/2 meter. The pen melted. The metal walls flowed like oil. Mina stood with her mouth agape. Then she quietly said that her best work had lasted 3 seconds. The system issued a notification. C-rank magma colossus, HP 4200, attack 190, defense 110, abilities, magma barrage, range 20 meters, damage 350, cooldown 15 seconds, lava storm, area of effect 15 meters, damage 200, duration 10 seconds, cooldown 60 seconds, fire shield, passive. Any creature approaching within 2 meters takes 50 damage per second. Ethan stood in front of Kevin. The colossus towered over him like a mountain. Black, scorching, the heat radiating from him melted rocks within a 3-meter radius. But Ethan stood right next to him and felt only warmth like from a fireplace in winter. Owner's protection. Kevin lowered his enormous head. 2 golden pools gazed at Ethan. The same look, the same gratitude, only now in eyes the size of a dinner plate. Ethan placed his hand on its muzzle. Hot, hard, like a heated stone, he said quietly. "Thank you, Kevin." The colossus growled. The ground beneath his feet vibrated. The villagers half a kilometer away felt it. They came out of their houses. They looked toward the farm. They saw a column of smoke and heat rising above the pens. The village elder crossed himself. On the 46th day, Darius from Hale. Ethan recognized his horse before he saw his face. A black stallion with a silver bridle. A guild horse worth 20 gold pieces. 8 hunters rode behind Darius. A full combat squad from the Silver Blade Guild. And among them, Ethan narrowed his eyes. Among them was she. Light hair tied back in a ponytail, slender fingers on the hilt of a short sword. The girl who had looked away when he was expelled, who had been saved by him 3 times, who had chosen the captain. Aaron. Darius stopped his horse by the farm. He looked around. He saw the pens. He saw the guardians. He saw the titans. He saw Kevin. His face hadn't changed. The master of the Silver Blade Guild was a man who never showed emotion in public. But Ethan noticed how his fingers on the reins had turned white. Darius dismounted. He entered the farm's grounds uninvited. The hunters stayed by the fence. Aaron looked at Kevin, at the C-rank colossus, the size of a van, at its black obsidian skin and the cracks oozing magma, at the 2 golden eyes that turned toward her. She turned pale. Darius walked up to Ethan. He stopped 2 steps away. He looked down at him. He was a head taller, broader in the shoulders. The silver clasp on his cloak glinted. The same cloak, the same gaze, the same eyes of a man accustomed to giving orders. He said he had arrived with an official order. Under the state of emergency declared by the Crown, the Silver Blade Guild had been granted the right to confiscate any resources related to the kingdom's defense. The monsters on this farm were classified as a strategic resource. They were to be placed under the guild's control immediately. Ethan remained silent. Darius pulled a sealed scroll from his belt. He unrolled it. He showed it to Ethan. A genuine document, a genuine seal, a genuine state of emergency. Ethan read the text. He saw the paragraphs. He saw the signatures. Everything was by the book, exactly how authority works. Let someone grow something valuable, then take it away. Declare that it's for the common good, and smile. Darius was smiling. Ethan looked at him, then at the hunters by the fence, then at his team. Rowan stood with her hand on her sword. Celeste stepped out onto the porch with a rapier. Mina was holding a hammer. Leah stood behind the pen, pale but not backing away. Yuki was jotting something down in a notebook. She was probably already coming up with a headline for the manifesto. Abby stood next to Ethan. Her eyes were cold, just like back then with the mercenaries. Ethan said quietly. He said no. Darius tilted his head. He asked again. Ethan repeated himself. No. The monsters would not come under the guild's control. Not a single one. Never. Darius raised the scroll. He waved it around. He said it was an order from the Crown. That disobedience was a crime. That Ethan could be arrested. Ethan asked by whom. Da turned to his hunters. 8 fighters. A full squad. The best swordsmen of the Silver Blade. Except for Aaron, they were all veterans. Each one could take down a shadow wolf on his own. Darius ordered them to enter the farm and subdue the monsters. The first hunter stepped through the gate. Kevin turned his head toward him. 2 golden eyes. The heat radiating from his body reached the hunter from 5 meters away. The hunter stopped. The second stepped forward. The third. They stood by the gate, staring at Kevin, at the 5 D-rank titans standing behind him, at the 12 E-rank guardians lined up on either side, at the 6 giants sacks the size of a calf, at Abi, whose eyes glowed aquamarine and whose body had begun to shimmer. Ethan gave no command to attack. The guardians stood in silence. The titans did not move. Kevin simply watched. But that was enough. A single C-rank magma colossus was worth 10 knights. 5 D-rank titans. Ranked titans were worth another 20. All the Silver Blade hunters combined wouldn't have lasted 3 minutes against this army. And they knew it. The first hunter lowered his sword. The second took his hand off the hilt. The third retreated behind the gate. One by one, 8 hunters stepped back. Without a word, without an order from Darius. They simply walked away, because the instinct for survival proved stronger than the order. Darius stood alone, in the middle of the farm, a scroll in his hand. His smile vanished. His face turned gray. He looked at his men, the men who had refused to obey, the men who, for the first time in his 10 years of service as guildmaster, had turned their backs on him. Then he looked at Ethan. Ethan said one thing. He said that in 14 days, 3,200 orcs would arrive at this swamp, and that his slugs would stand between them and the village, and that the Silver Blade Guild would sit in the capital behind stone walls and write reports on the confiscation of resources it had never actually confiscated. And that when it was all over, when the orcs were defeated or when the village burned to the ground, history will remember who fought, and who arrived with a piece of paper. Silence. The peasants stood behind the far fence, about 30 of them. They'd come because of the commotion. They'd seen everything. They'd heard everything. Darius slowly rolled up the scroll. He tucked it into his belt. He turned around. He walked toward his horse. His back was straight, but his steps were unsteady, like those of a man who'd been struck on the head but refused to show it. The hunters parted. Darius mounted his horse. But before riding off, he turned around. He looked at Ethan, and he said that this wasn't the end, that the guild would return, with a large contingent, with the best hunters, with knights if necessary, and that Ethan would regret it. Then he spurred his horse and galloped away. The hunters rode after him, all except one. Erin stood by the fence. She looked at Ethan, then at Kevin, then at the farm, at the pens, at the slugs, at Abby, at Leah, who stood with her hands pressed to her chest, at Celeste, who was sheathing her rapier, at Mina, who had lowered her hammer. Then Erin began to cry, quietly, silently. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. She just stood there and cried. Then she turned and ran after the squad. Her horse was waiting on the road. She jumped into the saddle and galloped off without looking back. The system displayed a cascade of values: shock plus 800, Darius Hale, disgrace, public. The Silver Blade Hunters, shock plus 400. The Villagers, shock plus 200. Total shock plus 1,400. Reputation in the village, 8. Threshold, 10, 2 points away. Celeste sheathed her rapier. She approached Ethan. She looked at him. Then she said his name. Not a farmer, not a swamp eccentric. Ethan. For the first time, the system noted it. Celeste Vaughn, favor, 10, threshold reached, first time being addressed by name. Ethan nodded. Then he turned toward the farm. Work awaited. 6 fire cores, 5 D-rank titans, 14 days. That evening, Mina prepared dinner, for the first time for everyone. A large table was carried out into the yard. Ethan, Leah, Celeste, Mina, Yuki, Roan, Abby. 7 people and 1 slug. Mina cooked a stew from whatever she had on hand. Some root vegetables, a little meat, lots of herbs from Leah. It smelled good. For the first time in a long time, it smelled like home. Mina ladled the soup into bowls. Abby took a bowl with both hands. She tasted it. Her eyes widened. She said it was the best thing she'd ever tasted in her life. Mina laughed and said her life had been short so far. Abby thought for a moment and replied seriously, yes. 26 days. Everyone fell silent. Then Mina laughed again, louder, and everyone laughed. Even Roan, even Celeste, just a little, with the corner of her lips. Ethan sat there and watched them, his team. The people who'd stayed with him in the swamp when the whole world told them to run. 14 days. Roan unfolded the map on the table that very night. She traced the orc's route with her finger, from the north through the forest, across Blacktooth Pass, along the wide road to the south. The village of Deadroot lay 2 kilometers from that road. The orcs could pass it by, but they wouldn't. Roan said this without emotion. It was a fact.
The orcs of Stonefang never leave villages behind. Total annihilation. That's been their strategy for 300 years. Roan asked what Ethan had. Ethan listed it. 1 C-rank magma colossus. Kevin, 4,200 HP. 5 D-rank lava titans. HP ranging from 700 to 800. 12 E-rank lava guardians. 6 D-rank giant sacks. 5 E-rank swamp sliders. 4 E-rank. 1 D-rank healer. The very first one. The moonlight mushroom raised him. Abby, a C-rank intelligent slime, HP 2,400, and 19 more slimes at various stages of development. Some will reach E-rank in a week. Roan listened. She counted. Then she said that wasn't enough. But there's an advantage that no other army in the world has. The terrain. The dead root swamp. Orc infantry, heavy.
In armor, they'll sink in the swamp, their bores will get bogged down, their formation will fall apart, and the slimes are at home in the swamp. Roan began to sketch a line of defense along the northern edge of the swamp, deep marsh on the left, hot springs on the right, a narrow passage 100 meters wide, the only path to the village, the giant sacks on the front line, a wall, 6 calf-sized carcasses, shoulder to shoulder. Behind them, the Guardians, 12 fiery spits every 10 seconds. Behind the Guardians, the Titans, 5 volleys, range 10 meters, damage 120. Behind the Titans, Kevin, Reserve, Main Celebra, Magma Barrage, range 20 meters, damage 350. Lava Storm, area of effect 15 meters. The sliders on the flanks, in the water, their element, acid waves slow the advance. Healers in the rear, Field Hospital, Abbey, Mobile Shield, defense where there's a breach, Celeste and Roan, living cover, for when the orcs break through the slime line. Roan finished and looked at Ethan. She said the plan would work. If the orcs attack head-on, if they all go through the pass at once, if they don't flank us through the marsh, if the shamans don't pull something unexpected. A lot of ifs. Ethan nodded. Then he asked how much military experience she had. Rowan replied matter-of-factly, 12 years in the border guard, 4 skirmishes with orcs, 1 full-scale battle. Her 30-man squad held the bridge across the Selm River against 400 orcs for 6 hours. The bridge held, the unit did not. Rowan was the sole survivor. She didn't say anything else. But Ethan saw the scar running from her temple to her chin and understood. The next 14 days became the most intense of his life, both lives. Kevin was producing condensate every 2 days. His HP was dropping, 583, 524, 472. Ethan kept watch. He fed him, he cared for him, but the condensate was needed. 5 D-rank titans received fire cores one after another. The second titan evolved into a colossus on the 49th day. HP 3,800. Slightly weaker than Kevin, but still a C-rank monster. The third titan became a colossus on the 52nd day. The fourth on the 54th. The fifth on the 56th day. The 6th didn't make it in time. It was 1 core short. The 6th Titan remained at D rank. The tally by the 58th day, 4 C rank magma colossi, including Kevin. 1 D rank lava titan. 12 lava guardians, some at E rank, some on their way to D rank. 8 giant sacks. 2 new ones have grown over the past few days. 7 swamp sliders. 2 new ones. 6 healers. 2 new ones. 23 young E-rank slugs of various lines. 1 C-rank intelligent slug. Abby. Total count, 62 monsters. Roan updated the plan. 4 colossi changed everything. 1 colossus could wipe out 100 infantrymen with a lava storm. 4 colossi, 400 in a single volley. But the cooldown is 60 seconds. In that minute, the orcs would manage to advance 20 meters. In 2 minutes, they'd reach the giants' line. Hand-to-hand combat would begin. The giants would hold out. D rank, 400 HP. But there are too many orcs. 10 orcs per giant. 100 axe blows. A giant would fall in 2 minutes. Roan had calculated it. Yuki had calculated it. Ethan had calculated it. The numbers didn't add up. Under ideal conditions, they could wipe out 1,000 orcs in the first 10 minutes. Then the line would start to give way. In 20 minutes, the front line would collapse. In 30, the orcs would break through to the healers. In 40, the battle would be lost. 3,200 minus 1,000. 2,200 orcs against 62 slimes without a front line. The math didn't lie. They would lose. Ethan stood by Kevin's pen that night. The Colossus was asleep. His body pulsed slowly. The magma in the cracks glowed dimly. HP 472 out of 4,200. 11% of his maximum. He'd given too much. Ethan placed his hand on the Colossus's side. Hot, alive, pulsing. Kevin opened one eye. Golden. He looked at Ethan. Ethan said there was no need for more tomorrow. No condensate, just food, just rest. Kevin closed his eye. He purred, quietly. Enough. Leah sat down beside him. She brought a cup of herbal tea, hot, smelling of mint and something sweet. Ethan took the cup. Their hands touched. Leah didn't pull away. Ethan looked at her. Her eyes glistened in the light of the magma. She said quietly that she'd remembered something. Her mother's song. That very one. About roots and light, about how the earth feeds the sky. She remembered the words, not all of them, but the first verse. Ethan leaned closer. Leah opened her mouth to say the first word. The system flashed red. Alarm. Orcs, 3 kilometers away. Advance patrol, 50 units, heading south, high speed. Estimated time of contact, 6 hours. Leah fell silent. She looked away. The herbal tea steamed in the cup between them. She said one word. Later. Ethan stood up. He set the cup on the ground. He looked north. Darkness. Silence. Somewhere, about 3 kilometers away, 50 orcs were heading toward the swamp. An advance patrol. Reconnaissance. The rest would follow in 2 days. 3,150. Ethan gave the order. Mentally, through the empathic link. All the monsters on the farm woke up at once. 62 creatures opened their eyes in the darkness. 24 orange flames, 16 pearlescent glows, 12 brown shadows, 4 black mountains with golden eyes, and 2 aquamarine beams. Roan was already standing by the gate, wearing a helmet, with a sword. Celeste beside her, a rapier in her hand. Mina with a hammer. Yuki with a notebook. Even now, with a notebook. Ethan looked at them, then at the swamp. Then he said it was an advance patrol. 50 orcs. This isn't a battle, it's a test. A chance to test Roan's plan on a small scale. Roan nodded. She said that if they couldn't stop 50, they certainly wouldn't be able to stop 3,000. Ethan agreed. Then he gave the order. The army advanced toward the northern edge of the swamp. The night was pitch black. No moon, no stars. Clouds covered the sky like a pot lid. Ethan stood on the northern bank of the swamp and stared into the darkness. 62 monsters took up positions according to Roan's plan. 8 sack giants in the front line. Their bodies blocked the passage. A wall of D-rank flesh. Behind them were 12 guardians, red glowing eyes in 2 rows. Behind the guardians stood 1 D-rank titan and 4 colossi. Kevin stood in the center. His cracked body barely glowed. HP 472. Weak, but still a C-rank colossus, still dealing 350 damage. The slithers had slipped into the water on the flanks. They were out of sight, only bubbles on the surface. The healers stood in the rear, 6 pearly glows. Abby stood next to Ethan, quiet, focused. Her usual childlike smile was gone. In its place was something else. Something older than 26 days. Roan stood to Ethan's right, helmet, sword. Back straight. She looked north and kept track of the time. Celeste stood to his left, rapier in hand. She didn't tremble. Ethan was surprised. He'd expected a 19-year-old girl from a line of knights to be nervous before her first real battle. But Celeste stood as still as a rock. Only her jaw was clenched. Mina and Leah had stayed in the village. Mina was preparing the second line of defense, barricades made of carts and stones. Leah was preparing medicine in case anyone was wounded. Yuki sat on a hill behind the positions with a spyglass and a notebook. She said she had to document the first ever use of evolved slugs in combat. Ethan didn't argue. The first sound reached them 4 hours later. The crackling of branches, far away, behind the trees. Then a thudding sound, heavy, rhythmic. Then a smell, sweat, iron, something animalistic. The system issued a notification. Hostile creatures, 52 units. Distance, 400 meters. Type, Stone Fang Orcs. Composition, 40 infantrymen. HP ranging from 120 to 200. 6 archers. HP ranging from 80 to 100. 4 elite swordsmen. HP ranging from 300 to 400. 1 shaman. HP unknown. 1 patrol commander. HP 450. Ethan relayed the information to Rowan. Rowan nodded. 1 shaman. That complicated matters. The shamans of Stonefang practiced dark magic, curses, weakening, raising the dead. Rowan said the shaman had to be killed first before he started casting. Ethan looked at Kevin. Magma barrage. Range, 20 meters. Damage, 350. If the shaman got within 20 meters, 1 shot would be enough. The orcs emerged from the forest 10 minutes later. Ethan saw them for the first time. Huge, a head taller than humans, broad-shouldered, green skin, rough armor made of bone and leather, axes, maces, shields made of wood reinforced with iron. Their faces covered in war paint, white stripes on green. They moved quickly, confidently, like people who know that ahead lies only a weak village and easy prey. The commander led the way. Huge, 2 meters tall, an axe in each hand, a necklace of human teeth around his neck. Behind him were 4 elite swordsmen, long, curved blades, eyes like slits, focused, dangerous. The shaman walked in the center of the formation, small, hunchbacked, wearing a robe made of animal skins, a beast's skull on his staff. His eyes were closed. His lips were moving. He was muttering. Archers in the back row, longbows made of black wood, arrows with bone tips, infantry between them. 40 green figures, 40 axes, 40 shields. They reached the swamp. They stopped. The commander raised his hand. He saw a passage, narrow, 100 meters, of the marsh, hot springs on the right, and in the passage, a wall of giants. The commander tilted his head. He looked, then he snorted. To him, they were slugs. Big ones, but slugs, F-rank, trash, the kind you crush with a boot. He gave the order, and the orcs moved forward, in formation, shields raised, axes at the ready, at a brisk pace, 200 meters, 150, 100. Ethan waited. Roan counted, 70 meters, 60, 50. Roan said the Guardians' range was 30 meters. The Guardians were standing behind the giants. That meant the orcs had to get within 20 meters of the front line. Ethan waited. 40 meters, 30, 25. The orc commander roared, "Attack!" The orcs picked up speed. They ran. Their pounding footsteps shook the ground. 20 meters. Ethan gave the order. 12 Guardians. Simultaneously, a volley. 12 fiery spits shot out from behind the giants' line. Red clumps of acid fire flew over the sacks' heads and struck the orc formation. 12 hits. 12 explosions of flame and steam. The front row of orcs vanished in the fire. Screams, roars, the smell of burnt flesh, smoke. When the smoke cleared, 8 orcs lay on the ground, charred. 4 more were rolling in the mud, trying to extinguish their burning armor. 12 out of 52 in 3 seconds. The orc commander survived. His shield took 2 blasts. The shield was smoking. His hand was burned, but he was still standing. HP 450. 2 spits at 40 damage each, minus 80. HP 370. He roared again. The orcs didn't run. They didn't retreat. They picked up speed. They covered the remaining 20 meters in seconds. They crashed into the giant's line.
Axes struck the D-rank flesh. The giants held firm. Their bodies sprang back. The axes got stuck in the slime. The orcs hacked and hacked, but the giants stood their ground. HP was dropping. 400, 380, 360. Slowly, but it was dropping. The guards fired a second volley over the giants' heads. 6 more orcs fell.
The commander hacked his way through one giant. His axe split the slime in two, the first casualty. Giant number 3, HP 0, dead. Ethan felt it through the bond, like a stab in the chest, brief, sharp, then emptiness. Giant number 3 was slow-witted, the slowest of them all, intelligence 2. He didn't know a single trick. He didn't know how to dodge. He just stood there and took the blows. Until the very end. Ethan clenched his teeth. Then he gave the command to Kevin. The Colossus emerged from the reserves. The black mountains surged forward. The ground shook beneath his footsteps. The orcs saw him. The commander saw him. And for the first time in the battle, he stopped. Kevin opened his mouth. Magma barrage. A pillar of liquid fire struck the center of the orc formation. 20 meters. Damage 350. 10 orcs within the blast radius. Those with HP below 350, dead, instantly. 7 bodies, charred. The ground beneath them had turned to glass. The remaining orcs recoiled. The shaman raised his staff. He began to cast. Dark energy flowed through his hands. Rowan shouted, "Shaman!" Ethan gave the command to the second Colossus. Magma barrage. A pillar of fire struck where the shaman had been standing, but the shaman was quick. He leaped aside. The barrage flew past him. It struck 3 archers behind him. 3 bodies. The shaman rose to his feet. His staff glowed green. Curse. A dark beam struck giant number 5. The giant screeched. His body began to turn black. His HP plummeted. 400, 300, 200, 100. The giant fell. HP 0. Second casualty. The shaman's curse killed a D rank in 4 seconds. Ethan went cold. What if the shaman reached the colossi? What if his curse worked on a C rank? Abby stepped forward. Her eyes blazed. Wave of fissure. She raised both hands. A wave of pearlescent light burst from her palms, wide, 10 meters. The wave swept across the battlefield, through the orcs, through the shaman, through everyone. The orcs she struck, their armor crumbled, their weapons shattered, their skin was covered in white cracks like porcelain. The shaman took the wave in the chest. His staff shattered into pieces. His mantle of hides turned to dust. He fell to his knees. He looked at his hands. His hands were white, like marble. He tried to stand up. He couldn't. HP 0. Silence for 3 seconds. Then the orc commander did something Roan hadn't expected. He didn't retreat. He leaped. Across the giant's line. Across the guardians. Straight at Ethan. 2 meters of green muscle and fury. 2 axes. 450 HP. Minus 80 from the spit. 370. He was flying straight at Ethan. Strength 2 out of 100. Dexterity 3 out of 100. Stamina 4 out of 100. Combat potential 0. Ethan saw the axe. He saw the orc's eyes. He saw death. Celeste stepped between them. A rapier made of ordinary steel. Light, slender, against 2 battle axes. She parried the first blow. The rapier bent. The steel groaned. The second axe came down from above. Celeste stepped aside. The axe plunged into the ground. She struck. The rapier pierced the orc in the gap between his shoulder and breastplate. Not deep. HP minus 30. 340. The commander yanked the axe out of the ground. He swung it. Celeste retreated. Her foot slipped in the mud. She fell to one knee. The commander raised both axes. Kevin turned his head. Fire shield. Passive ability. Any creature within a 2-meter radius of the Colossus takes 50 damage per second. Kevin took a step. 1 step closer to the commander. The heat struck the orc in the back. His skin began to smoke. His armor started to glow red hot. The commander roared in pain. He spun around to face Kevin. He saw 2 golden eyes. Close. Very close. Kevin opened his mouth. The commander managed to raise his shield. A point-blank magma blast. The shield melted. His arm was torn off along with it. The commander was sent flying 5 meters. He fell. He didn't get up. HP 0. The remaining orcs fled. 17 out of 52. They dropped their weapons. They left the wounded behind. They ran into the forest, into the darkness. Ethan stood rooted to the spot. His hands were shaking. His legs wouldn't hold him. He sank into the mud. The adrenaline wore off, and his body went limp. Celeste got up from her knees. She looked at her rapier. The blade was bent. The cheap steel hadn't withstood the blow from the orc's axe. She looked at Ethan, then at Kevin, then back at Ethan. She asked if they were alive. Ethan nodded. Then he looked out at the field. 35 bodies, charred, chopped to pieces. 2 dead giants, 2 out of 8. The system displayed the results. Battle over.
Enemy casualties, 35 out of 52. 17 retreated. Farm casualties, 2 D-rank sack giants. HP 0. Status killed. Care points -20. Penalty for the death of a ward. Ethan stared at the 2 shapeless piles of slime that remained of the giants. Number 3 and number 5. Dumb, slow, loyal. They'd stood on the front line and taken the brunt of the attack. Because he put them there. Because he decided they were expendable. Abby approached. She stood beside him. She looked at the dead giants, then at Ethan. She said quietly that they weren't afraid, that she'd sensed them until the very last moment. They weren't afraid. They were happy, because they were defending their home. Ethan closed his eyes. The system pulsed. General shock from those who witnessed the battle. 0. No one from the village saw it. Only his team. Roan, Celeste, Yuki on the hill. Yuki ran down the hill, her notebook pressed to her chest. She shouted that she'd written everything down, every volley, every movement, every parameter, that this was a revolution in military science, that the academy needed to know. Then she saw the dead giants. She fell silent. She closed her notebook. An hour later, Ethan returned to the farm. Mina was waiting. Leah was waiting. They saw the look on his face and didn't ask any questions. Leah poured him some herbal tea, hot, with mint. Ethan sat down on the porch. He drank in silence. Then he said that 3,000 would arrive in 2 days, and that 2 giants were gone. Mina sat down next to him. She was silent for a moment. Then she asked if new pens were needed. Ethan looked at her. Then he said he needed a rapier for Celesta. Made of lava condensate, lightweight, sturdy, one that wouldn't break from the blow of an orc's axe. Mina nodded. She said she'd make it. Ethan finished his brew. He stood up. He went to the pens. He caught 4 new slugs from the swamp. He put them on a high-speed feeding regimen. 2 giants had died. That meant he needed new ones. 4. In 2 days. Impossible. But he had to try. The system pulsed at the edge of his vision. Day 58. 2 days until the main wave. 3,150 orcs, minus 35. 3,115. The countdown continued. 2 days. Ethan hadn't slept a single minute. Mina worked at the anvil non-stop.
Lava condensate melted differently than ordinary metal. It was alive. It pulsed. It resisted the hammer. Mina broke 2 hammers before she figured out how to handle it. Don't hit it. Bend it, slowly, patiently, like sculpting with clay. By the end of the first day, the rapier was ready. A dark red blade with veins of magma. Light as a feather, stronger than anything in this world. Mina tested it herself. She struck it with the hammer with all her might. The blade didn't even ring out. The hammer bounced off. Mina whistled. Then she weighed the rapier in her palm, and said that in 20 years of blacksmithing, she'd never held anything like it. Celeste took the rapier without a word. She made 3 lunges. The blade sang through the air. A thin, high-pitched sound, like a string. Celeste looked at Ethan. Her eyes sparkled. She opened her mouth, closed it. Then she said one word. "Thank you." Ethan nodded. Then he turned toward the pens. The 4 new slugs on the accelerated diet weren't keeping up. 2 days was too short for evolution, even with the heart of the swamp. The second portion of the heart hadn't arrived yet. Regeneration would take 5 days. The slugs remained F rank.
Useless in combat. Ethan assessed their strength. 4 C-rank colossi, HP ranging from 3,800 to 4,200. Kevin was the weakest because of the condensate. 1 D-rank titan, 12 guardians, 6 giants, -2 casualties, 7 slitherers, 6 healers, 23 young E-rank slugs. Abby, a total of 58 combat units if you count the young ones, minus for useless F-rank units, 54, against 3,115 orcs. Rowan went over the plan again. The same passage, the same narrow bottleneck, but with changes. For colossi not in reserve. On the front line, next to the giants, a wall of fire and flesh. The guardians behind them, a volley over their heads. A D-rank titan on the left flank, slugs in the water, healers in the rear. Abby as a mobile shield and strike force. Young E-rank slugs. Rowan thought it over. Then she said the young ones should be placed in the swamp behind the flanks. Not for combat. For a trap. Their acid is weak, but if 50 orcs get stuck in the swamp and suffer acid burns, it will slow down the flanking attack by a minute. 1 minute for the colossi to reload. The difference between life and death.
Rowan drew another line on the map. The village, second line of defense, barricades. If the first line falls, retreat to the village, the last line of defense. Mina built barricades out of carts, stones, and logs. The villagers helped, all 80 of them. The old men carried stones, the children hauled branches, the women prepared water and bandages. No one left. Ethan asked the village elder why. The elder looked at him with teary eyes. He said there was nowhere to go. Then he paused and added that wasn't the point. He said that Ethan had healed his arm, healed Mina's back, healed the boy's wart, healed the old woman's knee at the edge of the village. That for the first time in 10 years, someone had given them more than he'd taken away. Ethan didn't say anything. He went to the farm. He fed the slugs. He checked the parameters. He counted the numbers. Yuki approached him at night, the last night before the battle. She was quiet. Without her usual rapid-fire speech, without her notebook, she said she'd calculated everything, 3 times, with different assumptions. The optimistic scenario, 2,000 orcs killed, a 60% loss of the herd, the village survives. The realistic, 1,200 killed, an 80% loss. The village's survival is in question. Pessimistic, the line falls in 20 minutes, a 100% loss. The village is burned to the ground. Ethan asked which one she thought was most likely. Yuki was silent. Then she said it was somewhere between the realistic and the pessimistic scenarios. Ethan nodded. Then he asked what could shift the balance. Yuki said one word, Abby. Abby was the only variable Yuki couldn't calculate. The fission wave destroyed a C-rank shaman in a single attack. The symbiotic shield stopped the arrows, but Abby had something else. Yuki had seen it in the system data. An unnamed ability. Locked. Requirement, 500 favor. Abby currently had 312. Yuki said that if somehow Abby reached 500 before the battle, and if that locked ability turned out to be what Yuki thought it was, the balance of power would shift. Ethan looked at Abby. She was sleeping by his door, curled up in a ball. Her pearlescent skin shimmered in the darkness. A small F-rank slime lay beside her. She was hugging it in her sleep, just as a child hugs a toy. Favorability, 312. Need 500. A difference of 188. In a single night. Impossible through normal care alone. But the system said that favorability grows, not only from care, but also from understanding, from acceptance, and from the words the creature wants to hear more than anything else in the world. Ethan sat down next to Abby. She opened her eyes, aquamarine, sleepy. She asked what had happened. Ethan said he wanted to talk. Abby sat up, looked at him, waited. Ethan told her what he'd known for a long time, but hadn't said.
He said she wasn't a monster, not a tool, not a weapon. She was Abby, and that was enough. He said there would be a battle tomorrow, that he didn't know how it would end, that maybe he wouldn't survive. But no matter what happened, she needed to know one thing. She was his family, not a pet, not a creature. Family. Abby looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. The slime's tears turned out to be clear and warm. They rolled down her pearly cheeks and glowed in the dark. She reached out and hugged him, tightly. Her body was warm, soft, pulsing, like a heartbeat. The system flashed, Abby's favor, plus 203. They came like a river, green, iron, endless.
Ethan stood on a hill behind the lines and watched as the forest spat out thousands of bodies, rank after rank, row after row, infantry, archers, cavalry on war boars, elite swordsmen, shamans, and at the very front, riding a boar the size of an ox, sat an orc who could be mistaken for no one else. Grimdal Stonefang, huge, even by orc standards, 2.5 meters, pea wide as a barn door, one eye, the other covered by a bandage made of human skin. Around his neck, not a necklace of teeth, but a chain of skulls, small ones, children's. Ethan looked at that chain, and his hand stopped trembling. The fear was gone. Something cold remained, calm, like a formula, like an equation with many variables. Rowan stood nearby. She was counting. The advance guard, 500, the main body, 2,000, the rear guard, 600, the cavalry, 300, shamans, 35. 5 were lost with the advance party, chiefs, 5, 1 killed, Grimdal, 1, total, 3,115 confirmed. Grimdal stopped the boar at the edge of the forest, 400 meters from the positions. He looked at the swamp, at the narrow passage, at a wall of giants and colossi. His single eye was calm. He wasn't surprised. The 17 survivors from the detachment had reported. He knew this wasn't an empty village. He knew about the fire slugs, about the black mountains of magma. But he came anyway, because Grimdal Stonefang did not go around obstacles. He went through them. Grimdal raised his axe, huge, two-handed, a blade of black stone. He struck his shield with the axe. Once, the sound echoed across the field like thunder. 3,000 throats responded with a roar. The ground shook. Birds took flight from the trees. Ethan felt the vibration in his bones. Grimdal lowered his axe. He pointed to the passage. The vanguard moved forward. 500 orcs in formation, shields raised. A broad front as wide as the passage allowed. 20 orcs in a row, 25 rows. They did not move quickly, steady, heavy. The ground rumbled beneath their footsteps. 300 meters, 200, 100. Rowan raised her hand. 70 meters, 60, 50. Rowan lowered her hand. Ethan gave the command. All 12 guardians, volley. 12 fiery spits struck the front ranks, but the orcs were ready. The front row raised their shields, wet, smeared with clay. The fiery spits exploded on the shields. Smoke, steam, but the shields held. The clay smothered the fire. Only 3 orcs fell. The rest pressed on. Roan cursed under her breath. They'd prepared. Wet shields coated with clay. A simple solution against fire attacks. Cheap and effective. Ethan gave the command to the colossi. 4 magma salvos, all simultaneously. 4 pillars of liquid fire struck the ranks. The clay shields were of no help. The magma burned through the clay in a second. The shields caught fire. They melted. The orcs behind them burned. 20 bodies in the first volley. 30 in the second. The vanguard lost 50 orcs in the first minute, but 450 pressed on, through smoke and fire, over the bodies of their own, across the burning ground. They crashed into the line of giants and colossi. Axes struck flesh, struck obsidian skin, sparks, clanging, roars. The giants held their ground. The colossi held their ground. Kevin's fire shield incinerated anyone who came within 2 meters. 50 damage per second. The orcs were burning. They retreated. They advanced again. They burned again. For 20 minutes, the vanguard's first assault crashed against the line of fire. The guardians fired volley after volley. The colossi rained down magma. Slimes on the flanks slowed down those trying to flank through the swamp. The orcs were stuck waist deep. Acid waves corroded their armor. They howled and drowned. 20 minutes later, only 200 orcs remained from the vanguard. They retreated. They regrouped. Grimdal watched from the hill.
His eyes never blinked. He raised his axe again. The main body. 2,000. They advanced. Ethan felt the ground give way beneath his feet, not literally, inside. 500 orcs had been a test. 2,000 was the real thing. They weren't marching in formation, a broad wave, across the entire pass, and beyond the pass, through the swamp, across the marsh, across the hot springs. Grimdahl didn't play by Rowan's rules. He sent 500 across the marsh on the left, 500 across the hot springs on the right, and 1,000 straight into the passage. The front stretched out over 300 meters. The narrow bottleneck was gone. Rowan turned pale. Then she clenched her teeth. Rearrangement. Colossi in the center.
Divide the guards into 2 flanks, slugs to the left flank into the swamp, young slugs to the right toward the hot springs. Giants remain in the center. Spread out the healers. The line stretched out. It became thin, fragile. The orcs on the left were bogged down in the swamp but kept moving, slowly, waist deep in mud. The slugs spat acid. The orcs howled, but they kept moving. The orcs on the right were scorched by the hot springs. Steam, screams, but they kept moving. The central 1,000 charged head-on, this time without wet shields, from a running start, with fury, with a roar that drowned out the sound of the fiery volleys. The colossi unleashed a lava storm, 4 at once. Area of effect 60 meters, 200 damage over 10 seconds. The ground turned to lava. 100 orcs perished in 10 seconds, 100 out of 1,000. 900 pressed on, across the lava. Their boots were burning, their feet were burning, but they kept going. The storm's cooldown was 60 seconds, 60 seconds without my main weapon. 900 orcs, 60 seconds. They reached me, they struck the line. The giants fell like dominoes. The first, HP down to 0 in 20 seconds. The second in 30. The third held out for a minute. 6 giants became 4, then 3, then 2. The guards fired non-stop. 10-second reload, volley, 10 seconds, volley. The orcs were falling, but there were too many of them. The line wavered. It buckled. On the left flank, orcs emerged from the swamp, wet, vicious, alive. 200 out of 500. The slugs lost 3, 4 remained. On the right flank, all the young slugs were killed. 23 E rank against 300 orcs. They held out for 4 minutes. The acid burned. It slowed them down, but it didn't kill them. The orcs broke through. 250 orcs were flanking the position on the right, 200 on the left, 1,000 minus casualties in the center. Ethan was counting. 700 in the center, plus 200 on the left, plus 250 on the right, 1,150 orcs, minus the remaining 200 from the vanguard who had pushed forward again. 1,350, and the rear guard hadn't moved yet. 600, plus 300 cavalry, plus the chieftains and shamans. Rowan shouted for a retreat to the village. Ethan gave the order. The colossi provided cover. The lava storms were reloading. The guardians retreated while firing. The healers ran toward the village. Abby stood there. She didn't move. She stared at the orcs. Her eyes burned so brightly that it hurt to look at them. Ethan called out to her. She turned around. She looked at him, and she said calmly that it wasn't time yet. The retreat to the village took 7 minutes. 7 minutes under a hail of arrows. The orc archers took up positions and rained arrows down on the retreating group. Arrows fell like rain. Abby brought up the rear. The symbiotic shield protected those who couldn't keep up. The arrows dissolved in a pearlescent light, but Abby couldn't protect everyone. One guardian took an arrow to the eye. HP 0. Another healer. An arrow through the body. HP 0. 2 dead. Ethan felt every death through the bond, like needles in his heart. Short, sharp, one after another. They reached the barricades. Mina stood behind a wall of carts with a sledgehammer. Peasants with pitchforks and axes flanked her on either side. 10 men, their faces pale. Their hands were trembling, but they stood their ground. An old man with straight fingers. The very same one. He held his scythe like a spear. His eyes were wet, but his legs were steady. Rowan deployed her remaining forces. 4 colossi at the corners of the barricade, guards on the walls.
The remaining sliders in the water-filled ditch in front of the barricade. Healers in the center of the village. Women and children in the cellars. Leah went down into the largest cellar, with medicine, with water, with 15 children clinging to her skirt. She looked at Ethan before going down, for a long time. Then she told him to go back. Ethan nodded. The orcs approached the village 20 minutes later. They took their time. They knew there was nowhere to run. The main force had regrouped. Grimdall rode forward on his boar. He stopped 100 meters from the barricade. He looked at the wall of carts, at the slugs on the walls, at the 4 black mountains at the corners. Then he looked at Ethan. Ethan was standing on the barricade, skinny, unarmed, barefoot, strength 2 out of 100. Grimdall smirked, with one eye. Then he raised his axe. And 3,000 orcs, no, 2,000. Casualties in the swamp totaled about 1,000. 2,000 orcs advanced on the village. From all sides, the colossi fired a volley. 4 magma volleys in 4 directions. 140 orcs in the first 3 seconds. The guards fired without pause. The orcs were climbing at the barricades. Mina met the first one with her hammer. A blow. The orc flew 3 meters away. Celesta stood beside her. Her rapier, forged from lava condensate, sliced through the orc's armor like paper. She moved quickly, precisely. A thrust, a step back, a thrust, a step back. 3 orcs in a minute. Rowan fought with her sword, silently, without a shout. Every strike precise, every movement economical. 12 years as a border guard. 4 skirmishes with orcs. It showed in every movement. The peasants stood by. An old man with a scythe jabbed an orc in the side. The orc howled. Another peasant struck with a pitchfork. A third threw a rock. They didn't know how to fight, but they stood their ground, because behind them were the sellers with their children. The barricade held for 15 minutes. Then the shamans joined the fight. 35 shamans, -1 killed by Abby in the swamp. 34. They formed a circle behind the line of orcs. They raised their staffs. Green light, dark energy. The curse struck Colossus number 2, the one standing at the eastern corner. Its 3,800 HP began to drop. 3,000, 2,500, 2,000. A single curse from one shaman dealt 300 HP damage per second. 34 shamans. If they all struck at once, that's 10,200 damage per second. No colossus could last a second. But the shamans didn't strike simultaneously. They took turns. 3 against 1 colossus. 900 HP per second. Colossus number 2 fell after 4 seconds. Black Mountain collapsed. The earth shook. Magma spread out. The 3 orcs standing nearby were burned in a pool of magma. But the colossus was dead. HP 0. Ethan felt its death. Not like a prick, like a sledgehammer blow to the chest. This colossus had grown from the slug he'd fed fiery grass to on the 25th day. The one that had looked at him with orange eyes every morning. The one that had purred when Ethan first called it by name. Ethan clenched his teeth so hard his enamel creaked. The 3 shamans transferred the curse to Colossus number 3. His HP began to drop. Ethan looked at Abby. Abby stood in the center of the barricade. Her body shimmered. It pulsed. Her pearlescent skin grew brighter. Her eyes burned so intensely they cast shadows. She looked at the shamans, then at Ethan, and she said, "It was time." Ethan nodded. Abby closed her eyes. The system flared gold. Queen's Awakening activated. Temporary boost to all stats, 300%. Duration, 10 minutes. Countdown initiated. Abby opened her eyes. They were no longer aquamarine. They were golden. Like Kevin's. Like magma. Like the sun. Her body grew. From a 20-year-old girl into something greater. 2 meters. 2.5. 3. Her skin was no longer pearlescent, but golden, translucent. Light pulsed within her, bright, warm, ancient. HP 7,200, attack 240, defense 135, enhanced fission wave, area 30 meters, damage 500. Abby raised her hands. The wave. Golden light surged from her like a tsunami. 30 meters in all directions, 500 damage. Every orc within the radius.
Foot soldiers with HP ranging from 120 to 200. Dead. Instantly. Elite swordsmen with HP ranging from 300 to 400. Dead. Archers. Dead. Shamans within the radius of effect, 12 out of 34. Dead. Their staffs crumbled. Their robes turned to dust.
Their bodies were covered in golden cracks and crumbled away. 200 orcs in a single attack. The field around the barricade was empty. Golden earth. Golden dust. Silence. The orcs outside the radius stopped. For the first time in the battle, for the first time in 300 years, Stonefang had stopped. Grimdahl looked at Abby. His single eye widened. Abby turned toward him. Her golden eyes met his single gray one. She took a step toward him. The ground beneath her foot glowed. Grimdahl clenched his axe. Then he did something no Stonefang warrior had done in 300 years. He retreated. One step back. His boar grunted. He retreated. The orcs around him saw it. Their chieftain, their god of war. He had retreated. A murmur rippled through the ranks. Abby raised her hands again. The second wave. Golden light. Another 30 meters. Another 150 orcs. Those who hadn't managed to flee. Dead. The remaining shamans. 10 out of 22. They struck all at once. The curse wasn't on the Colossus. It was on Abby. 10 beams of dark energy struck the golden body. HP began to drop. 7,200. 6,000. 5,000. Abby flinched. But she didn't fall. She looked at the shamans. She raised one hand. A directed wave, narrow, like a spear. A golden beam pierced the 10 shamans right through. 10 bodies fell at once. The curse ended. Abby's HP, 4,800. The system was flashing. A countdown. 6 minutes left. Abby moved forward, toward the orcs. Every step left a golden trail. Every step caused an earthquake. She raised both hands. The third wave. 6 minutes. Abby walked across the field like a golden sun. The orcs fled from her. For the first time in the history of Stonefang, they fled. They dropped their weapons. They dropped their shields. They trampled each other. Grimdahl roared at them. He struck the shield with his axe. He ordered them to stop. But instinct proved stronger. 1,200 orcs were fleeing from a single creature. Abby unleashed the fourth wave. The fifth. Each swept away 100. Her HP dropped with every cast. 4,800. 4,000. 3,200. Each wave drained her strength. Every strike took its toll on her. Ethan watched as she slowed down, as the golden glow dimmed, as her 3-meter-tall body began to shrink. 2 minutes. Abby stood in the middle of a field strewn with bodies. The orcs had retreated behind the line of trees. All but one, Grimdahl. He stood 50 meters away, alone. His boar had fled. His chieftains were dead. All 5 of them. The wave had taken them out. His shamans were dead. All 34 of them. His elite were dead. His army had fled into the forest. He stood alone, an axe in his hands. 2.5 meters of green muscle and fury. 450 HP. He hadn't taken a single hit the entire battle. His shield had absorbed 1 wave and held. A shield made of mountain troll bone. Abby looked at him. She raised her hand. The final wave. 1 minute left. 2,300 HP. That's enough. The wave struck. A golden light engulfed Grimdahl. His shield cracked. His bone armor turned black. His skin was covered in golden cracks. HP minus 500. Ethan saw it in the system. Grimdahl's HP, 450 minus 500. It should be 0, but no, the system showed Grimdall, Stone Fang, Supreme Chieftain, Race Ability, Unbreakable. When taking lethal damage, HP does not drop below 1. One-time use, HP 1. Grimdall stood. Blood oozed from the cracks in his skin. His armor crumbled. His axe had been heated to white hot by the wave. But he stood. HP 1. And he was smiling. Teeth like blades. One eye ablaze. He raised his white-hot axe and ran toward Abby. Abby raised her hand again. Empty. The wave didn't go off. Countdown. 0. The Queen's awakening is complete. All stats have returned to base values. HP 2,400. Attack 80. Her body shrank back to normal size. The golden light faded. Pearl white skin. Aquamarine eyes. Tired. Dull. Abby staggered. A side effect. Loss of consciousness in. She fell. To the ground. Face first into the golden dust. Her eyes closed. HP 2,400, but consciousness at 0. 12 hours of unconsciousness. Grimdall ran toward her. Axe raised. HP 1. But he had his axe. And Abby lay unconscious. Ethan ran. Strength 2 out of 100. Dexterity 3. Stamina 4. He ran. Across the field. Over bodies. Across the burning ground. Bare feet. Scorched earth. He felt nothing. He ran. Grimdall was 20 meters from Abby. Ethan was 30. He won't make it in time. Kevin. Ethan gave the command. Mentally. Kevin was standing by the barricade. HP 472. 11% of maximum. His body was dull. The magma barely glowed. He'd given too much. Condensate after condensate. Portion after portion. For the others. For the herd. For the army. But he heard the command. And he ran. A C-rank colossus, the size of a van. Across the burning field. The ground rumbled beneath his footsteps. He ran slower than he should have. HP 472. He was weak. But he ran. Grimdall was 10 meters away from Abby. Kevin was 15. Grimdall raised his axe. Kevin opened his mouth. Magma burst. A pillar of liquid fire. Point-blank range. Grimdall saw it. He raised his arm with the red-hot axe as a shield. The burst struck the axe. The black stone blade melted. Molten metal spattered. Grimdall was flung backward. He fell. His arm was burned down to the bone. The axe was gone. He lay 5 meters away from Abby. 1 HP. 1 arm. No weapon. No armor. He got up. On one knee. Then to his feet. He looked at Kevin. At the black mountain with golden eyes standing over Abby. Fire shield. 50 damage per second. To anyone who comes within 2 meters. Grimdall had 1 HP. He couldn't get close. 1 step and it would be over. Grimdall stood and watched. Then he looked at Ethan. Ethan was standing next to Kevin. Barefoot. Skinny. Unarmed. Grimdall smirked. Then he said something in Orcish. Ethan didn't understand the words, but the system translated them. He said that a farmer had defeated a warrior, that the world had gone mad. Then Grimdall turned toward the forest, toward his fleeing army, and walked away, slowly, heavily. Blood dripped from his scorched hand. He didn't look back. Celeste ran up, a rapier in her hand. She looked at Grimdall as he walked away, then at Ethan. She asked why he didn't finish him off. Ethan looked at the orc's back, at the necklace made of children's skulls, then at the field around them. Thousands of bodies, burning earth, smoke, a smell he would remember for the rest of his life. He said it was enough. Celeste sheathed her rapier. Silently, Roan approached. She took off her helmet, sweat and blood on her face. She watched the retreating orcs. Then she froze. Among the bodies on the field, 1 orc, not dead, wounded. He was lying on his back, young, by orc standards, almost a teenager, green skin, but his eyes were different. Not black like the others. Gray. Human gray eyes in an orc's face. Roan dropped her helmet. Her hands trembled. She said a name, quietly. So quietly that Ethan could barely hear it. Kaydan. The orc on the ground turned his head. He looked at her. His eyes widened. He spoke a word in the common tongue. Not in Orcish, in the common tongue. He said, "Sister." Rowan fell to her knees beside him. Her hands were shaking. She touched his face. Green. Alien. But with the gray eyes she knew. The ones she'd dreamed of for 20 years. Her twin brother.
Kaydan. Stolen as a child, raised by orcs, who had become a warrior of Stonefang against his will. Rowan embraced him tightly. She didn't cry. Commanders don't cry. But her shoulders shook. Ethan stood nearby. Kevin stood nearby. Abby lay unconscious on the ground. The field was ablaze all around them. Smoke rose toward the red sky. Shouts rang out from the village, not cries of fear, cries of joy. The villagers emerged from their cellars. They looked out at the field, at the thousands of bodies, at the burning earth, at the colossi standing like black mountains, and they realized they were alive. The morning after the battle was quiet. No wind, no birds. Even the swamp was silent. Smoke from the burning field rose straight up into the gray sky.
Ethan sat on the porch of the hut and looked at his hands. His burned feet were wrapped in rags. Leah sat beside him, silently. Her hand rested on his, warm, small. She hadn't pulled it away. He hadn't pulled his away either. Abby was sleeping inside the hut. Her breathing was steady. Her pearly skin shimmered slightly. 12 hours of unconsciousness. The system was showing a countdown. 7 hours until she woke up. Ethan spent the morning tallying the losses. 2 C-rank colossi were dead. Kevin and Colossus number 4 were alive. All 6 giant bags were dead. Of the 12 guardians, 9 had survived. Of the 7 sliders, 4. Of the 6 healers, 4. All 23 young E-rank slugs were dead. 1 D-rank titan is alive. Abby is alive. The herd's losses, 33 monsters out of 58, 57%. Yuki approached him with a notepad. Her voice was quiet, lacking its usual pace. She read out the results. Stonefang's orc army, 3,115 fighters, killed in battle. Approximately 1,900. An exact figure is impossible. The bodies were partially burned. Fled. Approximately 1,200, including Grimdal. All 34 shamans are dead. All 6 chieftains are dead. The entire elite is dead. Grimdal is alive but missing an arm. Without his axe, without an army, Stonefang has ceased to exist as a military force. For the first time in 300 years, Yuki closed her notebook. She looked at Ethan. Then she said she would write about this, about everything, about the farm, about cascading evolution, about the Queen's awakening, about the farmer from the swamp who stopped an army with slugs. She'll call it Moore's theory. And the academy that expelled her for heresy will read this text while kneeling. Ethan said nothing. He stared at the field, at the bodies, at the burning earth, at the 2 shapeless blobs of magma that had been the colossi. He'd raised one of them from a slug on the 25th day. He fed it fiery grass every morning. He called it by name. The monster looked at him with orange eyes and growled. Now it was a puddle of solidified stone. Mina approached, silently, without laughter, for the first time ever, without a smile. She sat down next to Ethan. She was silent for a long time. Then she said she had something in the basement. She said her husband had left it there. She said he wasn't a blacksmith, that he was a dragon knight, that he'd been hiding from the Inquisition, that he'd died of an illness, not from his work, and that there was S-rank gear in the basement, a full set. She hadn't told anyone for 2 years. Ethan looked at her. Mina stared at the ground. Then she looked up. Her eyes were wet, red. She said that she had the right to be happy again, that Ethan had shown her that his farm had shown her that life goes on, even after losses. The system noted quietly, Mina's son, favor, 20, threshold reached. She told him about her husband. By noon, a horseman arrived in the village, on a government horse, wearing a cloak bearing the royal seal. Not a lieutenant, a herald, young, immaculate, clearly someone who had never seen battle. He stopped at the edge of the village. He looked out at the field, at the bodies, at the smoke, at the congealed pools of magma, at Kevin, who was standing by the farm and whose golden eyes were watching every movement. The herald turned pale. Then he dismounted. He approached Ethan,
He took a scroll bearing 3 seals out of his bag, the royal seal.
The military seal, the Chamber of Commerce seal. He unrolled the scroll and read it aloud. A decree from the Crown. In connection with the destruction of Stone Fang's army by the forces of the farm on the territory of the Dead Root Swamp. By this decree, the Crown hereby grants Ethan Moore an S-rank breeder's license, permanent, without restrictions, with the right to breed any species of monsters within the kingdom, with the right to sell and supply combat monsters to the Crown's army, with the right to hire workers and expand the territory. The Moore farm is hereby recognized as an official supplier to the Crown. The herald rolled up the scroll and handed it to Ethan. Then he pulled a second item from his bag, a badge, silver, engraved with a crown and a slug in the center, an S-rank license. Ethan took the badge, small, heavy, warm from the sun. He remembered another badge, the guild badge, the one Darius had thrown in his face 60 days ago, the one that had shattered on the stone floor. 2 pieces of silver amid the laughter of 20 hunters. Ethan clenched the new badge in his palm, not out of anger, out of something else, something heavy and warm. Just like the badge itself, the system had worked as intended. Shock from the witnesses. The herald, plus 500. The village peasants, plus 1,000. General shock, plus 1,500. Farm rank, F-. Recalculation, C. Farm rank C in a single day. Reputation in the village, 10. Threshold reached. The village recognizes Ethan then as a protector. Abby woke up an hour after the herald left. She opened her eyes, aquamarine, sleepy. She looked at Ethan. She smiled. She said she'd had a strange dream, that she was huge, golden, that there were green creatures around her, and she could feel their fear. Then she frowned. She said there was someone else in the dream, someone familiar, a voice, a woman's, an old woman's, who spoke to her in a language she didn't know, but she understood. The voice said she was the last one, that the system had been waiting for her, that the ancient empire remembers, that the slugs were the first rulers of this world. 1,000,000 years ago, before humans, before orcs, before dragons, they existed, and they were forgotten. And Abby, the last queen, she had slept for 1,000,000 years in the form of a drop of amber resin on a 1,000-year-old tree. She waited for the vessel. She waited for Ethan. Ethan listened. The system confirmed every word with quiet notifications. Abby, the reincarnation of the last queen of the slimes of the ancient empire. A memory fragment has been restored, 1 of 1,000. Favor, 515. The threshold is 1,000. Full awakening of memory. Still a long way off, but it has begun. Ethan sat next to Abby and listened. Outside the window, peasants were dismantling the barricades. Mina was hammering away. She was repairing the fence. Yuki was writing a manifesto. Celeste was sharpening her rapier, cleaning it of orc blood. Rome sat by the fire with Kadan, her brother. Green skin, gray eyes. He was eating soup from a bowl and looking at his sister, whom he hadn't seen in 20 years. Roan didn't take off her helmet, but Ethan knew she was smiling beneath it. Leah entered the hut. She brought a potion, hot, with mint. She set it down next to Ethan. Then she sat down. She looked at Abby, at Ethan. Then she said she'd remembered. Her mother's entire song, every word, about roots and light, about how the earth feeds the sky. She began to sing, softly. The melody was simple, ancient. The words were in a language Ethan didn't know, but the system highlighted every word. Formulas, recipes, ancient lines of evolution, forgotten branches that aren't in the current tree, legendary paths. Mother Leah's song was the key to lines that couldn't be unlocked by either reason or chance, only by this song, only this melody, sung by the last priestess of the Green Leaf sect, who knew the ancient formulas because the sect had preserved the memory of the slime empire for 1,000,000 years. The system opened a new panel. The legendary branches were unlocked. 12. Slime Titan.
Slime Arhant, Slime Keeper, Slime Prophet. 12 paths this world hadn't seen since the last bearer was burned by the Inquisition 300 years ago. Ethan stared at the panel. Leah sang. Abby listened with her eyes closed. She was smiling. Somewhere in the capital, in a dark cathedral, the Grand Master of the Inquisition of the Pure Path was closing an ancient book. On the cover was the symbol of a slime wearing a crown. He already knew. The rumors had spread quickly. The farm in the swamp.
An army of slugs. The golden creature that had destroyed the orcs. An S-rank knight's license from the crown. He knew what it meant. He had seen it 300 years ago, in the records, in the archives, in the ashes of the previous vessel. They had returned. But that would come later. Right now, Ethan was sitting in his hut on Dead Root Marsh. Next to him, Abby. Next to her, Leah with her song. Behind the wall, Mina with her hammer. Yuki with her notebook. Celesta with her rapier. Rowan with his brother. Kevin by the pen, his eyes a dull gold. 9 guardians, 4 sliders, 4 healers, 1 titan, 2 colossi. A small army, battered, exhausted, having lost half its numbers, but alive. Harold left another scroll. Ethan unrolled it later. An invitation to court. The king wants to see the farmer who stopped Stonefang. In a month, in the capital. An official audience. Ethan placed the scroll on the table. He looked at the S-rank mark in his palm, then at the farm outside the window, at the crooked shack patched with sedge, at the pens Mina had built with her own hands, at the swamp that smelled of rot and was the most beautiful place in the world. He stepped out onto the porch. Evening, sunset, a red sky over the swamp. The slugs in the pens were quietly bubbling. Kevin stood at the edge of the farm. He watched the sunset with his golden eyes. His HP began to regenerate. 480, 500, slowly, but it was rising. As always, just like on the first day, Abby was standing nearby. She was looking at Kevin and smiling. Behind them were Leah with a basket of herbs, Celeste with a rapier on her back, Mina with a hammer on her shoulder, Yuki with a notebook pressed to her chest, Roan in a helmet, and Caden beside her, green skin and gray eyes. The villagers of Dead Root stood by the fence. 80 people, alive, all of them. The village elder held his hat in his hands. A boy without a wart waved his hand. An old man with straight fingers stood upright. Ethan looked at them, at all of them. Then he looked at his army, at the slimes everyone called trash, at the creatures they'd stomped on without a second glance, at the F-rank slime blobs that had become guardians, titans, and colossi, who stood on the front lines and died for a village that wasn't their home, who defended the people who had considered them waste their entire lives. The system issued the last notification of the day. Shock points, plus 50,000. Farm rank, C. Legendary class unlocked. Slime Titan. Kingdom of Argelian. Recognition level. The beginning of a legend. Ethan closed the notification. He looked at the sunset. Then he said quietly, so quietly that only Abby, standing nearby, could hear him. He said that everyone called them trash, but he called them his own. Abby took his hand. Kevin growled. The ground vibrated. The 9 guardians flared orange. The 4 healers shone pearlescent. The Dead Root swamp glowed in the setting sun. Alive, warm, full of wonders this world had yet to see. The Moore farm stood at the edge of the swamp. Small, battered, real.